Chapter 397. After obtaining the compression technology, the depth and breadth of the mechanic class's combat power had increased at the same time. They had the ability to instantly take the initiative or turn the situation around. The speed of setting up the battlefield had a huge impact on the final outcome of the battle. In the version after the rise of the mechanic class, the other supers would basically rush forward and stop the mechanic from setting up the battlefield. If the mechanic class was allowed to set up the weapons, the situation would be irreversible, and they would slide into the abyss of failure. Of course, this was the normal situation. Some special abilities or items would not be considered for the time being. From the perspective of the battle rhythm, the mechanic class naturally had the rhythm, forcing the enemy to have no choice but to deal with it. This was a huge advantage. Furthermore, even if the rhythm of the mechanic class was temporarily broken and he had no time to set up the battlefield, he could not let his guard down. If the mechanic class took a breather and set up the battlefield, the situation would be reversed and all his previous efforts would be wasted. Han Zhao's mechanic class had just taken shape, and he already had such a troublesome ability. He was very experienced, so the speed of setting up the battlefield could not be slow. At this time, the battlefield was filled with cannon fire, and the Sunil mercenaries fell one after another. This was a spar. After the Sunil mercenaries fell, Haluz, who was waiting at the side, dragged them out of the battlefield. He had been busy since the start of the battle and had not stopped at all. A pugilist mercenary suddenly jumped up and drew a parabola in the air, tried to avoid the traps all over the ground, and jumped to Han Zhao's side. At this time, a metal trap that he had jumped over was suddenly triggered. A bouncing mine shot into the air and exploded with a bang, exploding with a net-like blue electric current. Taking a closer look, this was a capture trap made of thin metal ropes. It was connected to a high voltage, and it covered the pugilist mercenary in midair. Buzz! The man let out a blood-curdling scream as he was instantly electrocuted and charred black. He fell into another repulsive trap, and an invisible force sprayed towards the cone-shaped area above him. The man bounced up again with his head down. A few turrets turned towards him and focused their fire. The continuous barrage of bullets was like an elongated stick, pushing him out. With a bang, he fell until he was dizzy and directly fainted. This scene instantly dispelled the other mercenaries' thoughts of jumping up. You want to jump over? Not so easy. Han Zhao smiled. There were mines in the trap, and there were also bouncing traps that could detect objects in the air to prevent them from advancing in the air. Within the range of his mechanical force, the machinery would receive his own bonuses. Some of the cannons were placed beside him, and their power was increased by several times. Whoever charged at the front would receive the most intense firepower. Faced with such a situation, the mercenaries spread out and charged from different directions to disperse the firepower of the cannons. Lurden was covered in a green shield. He was blinking under the rain of bullets, but he still ran forward. In other directions, there were many mercenaries equipped with shield generators. Colorful light balls passed through the cannon fodder and traps and approached quickly. Han Zhao curled his finger, and another wave of compressed orbs flew out and landed beside him. They expanded and turned into more than 20 beast-shaped robots. They were about the size of a medium-sized dog, completely black and covered in armor. However, they had the streamlined body of a cheetah, like an armored black panther. There was a vertical opening on each of their shoulders, revealing 3 gun barrels arranged side by side. They were equipped with machine guns inside, and they had segmented scorpion-like tails that were very agile. At the end of the tails was a sharp alloy blade that flashed with electricity. Han Zhao had prepared a total of 3 combos. The first was the multiple turrets fire coverage style, which did not require any technical skills. All he had to do was shoot. The second was the trap style, which required some control. It mainly depended on whether the area of the trap could protect himself and restrict the enemy's movement. The third was the hound style. The hound style was to control a group of small mechanical beasts to harass, and kill the enemy like hounds. The reason it was called this was because the basic machine that formed this style was called a mechanical hound. This kind of blueprint was relatively easy to obtain, and Han Xiao was using an enhanced version of the mechanical beasts. Black Panther Combat Mechanical Beast was a new blueprint that he had created by combining the blueprints of many low-level mechanical beasts. A Black Panther had 2,700 armor points, while the basic mechanical hound only had 1,500. Its attack was also about 70 points higher, and it had more functions. Its performance was also stronger, and it had an essential self-destruct function. Go! Han Xiao pursed his lips, and more than 20 mechanical Black Panthers dashed out. They were very fast, and the gun barrels on their shoulders opened fire. They moved between the gaps of the traps and attacked from the side of the enemy. This was the weakest spot of the enemy's defense, and it immediately slowed down the group's pace. Once the mercenaries got close to the mechanical Black Panthers, the Black Panthers would immediately jump away and keep their distance. They would only get close to the enemy when they were ambushing. Sometimes, 3 or 4 mechanical Black Panthers would form a team and attract the enemy's attention from different directions. Then, a mechanical Black Panther would ambush them from the back. It would jump up, and its tail would slash horizontally, leaving behind a cold glint. The mechanical Black Panthers were equipped with smart chips, and 4 of them form a group. They could only be used as a unit for simple tactical coordination. Han Zhao's chip manufacturing skills were still at the basic level, so the mechanical Black Panther's combat ability was not independent enough. The commands they could recognize were limited, and they could only be used to harass turrets, traps, and mechanical beasts. These 3 axes were used, and the Sunil mercenaries felt like they were wading through mud. Han Xiao observed the effects and nodded. This system is not afraid of being ganged up on, and it can beat up supers weaker than me. If it's against people of the same level, it can also be used to harass and drain their health. But the damage will be very high. Bang! Just as he was thinking, a mechanical Black Panther was blown away and smashed into a turret, tilting the barrel. In the blink of an eye, someone finally passed through the blockade. Lurden was surrounded by green light, and he finally got to his side. With a low roar, the green light in his hand turned into a knight's light spear, and he suddenly stabbed forward. Clatter! In the blink of an eye, the compressed orbs on his necklace expanded, and a white mechanical suit covered his body instantly. The light spear stabbed his chest, but it could not pierce through this white mechanical suit. Han Xiao did not say anything and slapped him. Bang! Lurden was slapped to the ground face first, and his face hit the ground with a loud thud. He could not fight back at all. Everyone's expression changed. They saw that Han Zhao's appearance had changed. He was wearing a white combat suit. The texture of the armor was like bone, but it was unbelievably tough. It looked more like a knight's armor made of bone. The armor was beautifully designed, and the shoulders were carved into the shape of a dragon's head. The chest armor was connected to the abdomen, and it could support more agile movements. The people present did not know if they were hallucinating, but this mechanical suit seemed to be giving off an inexplicable aura, making them feel mysterious. Void Dragon, single soldier mechanical suit. Compared to snake-type mechanical suits, such as Viper and Amphiptera, this dragon mechanical suit was stronger. It was not that the technology was more advanced, but that the materials used were rare. It was made from the Void Dragon bones obtained from Floating Dragon Island. It was light and tough, and it contained special energy. This mechanical suit did not have so many mechanical weapons, and it was specifically used for melee combat. Its armor value was a terrifying 30,000 points. Furthermore, the Void Dragon bones gave the mechanical suit additional equipment and skills. Han Zhao's necklace had 3 compressed orbs, all of which were mechanical suits. One was Void Dragon, and the other 2 were Amphiptera. Whether a mechanic was strong or not depended on the attributes and quantity of the machinery. He did not lack either. He could only do this if he was rich. Seeing this, the other mercenaries all stopped in their tracks and smiled bitterly. We admit defeat. The difference in strength was too great. They had tried so hard to get close, but they realized that Han Xiao was stronger than all the machinery present. There was no way they could fight him at all. There were more than 100 of them. They had thought that they were the ones fighting, but now they felt like they were the ones being beaten up. They had clearly surrounded Han Xiao, but it felt like Han Xiao had surrounded them alone. Han Xiao smacked his lips. He was not satisfied yet. He had not tested all his weapons, and there was still a set of cannons that he had not taken out. He could only regretfully put away all his machinery. After cleaning up the battlefield, this group of Sunil mercenaries gathered in front of Han Xiao. They had only suffered some light injuries, and their eyes were filled with respect. The strong were always respected. Han Xiao said a few words, mostly saying that they had passed the test and that their strength was not bad. He then sent the Sunil away and told them to go on with their missions. Returning to the base alone, Han Xiao went to the machinery modification room, pondered, and summarized his experience. Based on the current results, the battle plan I envisioned is basically formed. The difficulty of my class advancement at level 95 is a bit high, so I might be stuck at this level for a long time. This combo is very strong at this stage, so it can be used as a transition. There are also many ways to strengthen it. He took out these newly built mechanical weapons and looked at the attributes of the items on the interface again. There was a variety of turrets and traps. They were all new blueprints that he had combined with various mechanical technologies, and their performance had increased by 25 to 40%. He looked at Void Dragon's data. Amphiptera was a more well-rounded type, so he did not create another duplicate type. Void Dragon was good at close combat, and because of the rare materials, the equipment's abilities were very strong. Void Dragon type, combat uniformed light mech grade, purple equipment requirements, LV90, mechanic, more than 4,000 energy, more than 200 ND basic stats, armor 30400/30400, defense 375, power level 1,360, energy 9,000, height 191 meters, weight 143 pounds, control method low-level smart chip plus nerve link plus 10 DX, energy source, portable stabilized nuclear fission mini reactor, automatic recharge, restores 120 energy per minute. If energy is used as fuel, energy consumption 30/S, energy recovery 55/S, standby mode consumption 25 energy/min battle mode consumption 48 energy/min core power output 775/1, 200 skeleton module, TM 150 nano biochemical tendons. Mechanical suits inner lining. Provides elasticity with movement. Increases damage output and physical performance. Plus 57 STR, plus 45 dex. Power output 150. Energy can be used to stimulate the tendons. Energy consumption 40 energy per minute. Plus 33 overall. Attributes armor module. Void Dragon skeleton, pink rare material. Plus 28,000 armor, plus 320 defense palm module. Vibration converter, purple. Generates vibration damage. 11% of melee damage is armor piercing. Power output, 50 wrist module, wrist strength enhancement ring. Plus 10 STR, power output, 30 leg module. Internal booster injection circuit. Plus 8 DX, power output, 30 propulsion module. Small maneuvering equipment, purple, X12. Power output, 240 survival module. Vital signs monitoring, temperature maintenance system, oxygen filtration, gravity stabilizer, emergency injection device, high pressure resistance device. Power output, 150 chip module. Damage detection, analysis database, trajectory prediction, remote control, combat assistance, neuron signal conversion. Power output, 110 accessory module, electromagnetic pulse controller, purple. Gains excited status, plus 7 all attributes. Lasts for 15 minutes. Energy consumption, 5. Power output, 15 accessory module. Compressed orb storage and ejection pipe accessory ability. Powerful performance. In battle mode, more energy is allocated to the biochemical tendons to generate more power. Plus 45 STR, plus 35 deck side effect. This equipment is buffed by the power of the void. After equipping, max HP will be reduced by 3,000. Chapter 398. The equipment restriction is quite high. Normally, when a mechanic reaches LV90, it will be very difficult for their endurance to reach 200 points. Even if they have 200 points of endurance, they will only have 8,000 HP. After wearing it, I will lose 3,000 HP, which is almost half of my total HP. I'm most afraid of psychic attacks. They can penetrate my armor, but that's only 1/5 of my HP. Han Xiao nodded in his mind. The Void Dragon was the strongest combat suit that he could create at the moment. He had used up all the materials and could not replicate it. Be it in terms of tankiness or damage output, it was insanely strong. The two core skills were indestructible durability and Void Jet. The former increased resistance and had the ability to self-repair, while the latter had terrifying explosive power. It came from a magic accumulated in the bones of the Void Dragon. Although Han Xiao was a mechanic, due to the special properties of the materials, the Void Dragon he created could be considered half magic and half machine equipment. If he wanted to make the self-repair effect through mechanical means, there were many possibilities. For example, nano-repair robots, which required the high-end knowledge of the energy branch, nano-power, or alloys with memory characteristics, which required the equipment branch, high-end material technology. By the way, speaking of magic, Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. He called the three Volga brothers over. The three of them looked like they were made from the same mold, and it was difficult to recognize them. Usually, the boss would speak on behalf of the three of them. "Captain, why are you looking for us? What kind of magic do you know?" Han Xiao looked at the boss of the Volga brothers. "I'm a mage, proficient in water spells." The boss of the Volga brothers introduced. The eldest Volga brother introduced. The second brother is good at evocation spells and buffing auras, while the third brother is a psychic. Actually, when we were young, the three of us went to the Mage Advanced Study Academy together, but only the third brother was rejected. I still remember the recruitment tutor telling him, "Give up magic. Your talent is not suitable for this school. To you, magic is as high as Mount Verisal." Do you know Mount Verisal? That's the highest mountain in our hometown. Boss was a chatterbox, and he could not stop talking. He changed the topic in an instant. Han Xiao was stunned for 2 seconds, and the topic had already changed to how their first pet died in their childhood. "Stop!" Han Xiao hurriedly stopped the boss of the Volga brothers, coughed, and said, "I called you guys over to add magic to the weapon." As he spoke, he pointed at the machine on the table. The three of them had no objections to the captain's request. However, when they looked around, their expressions immediately turned bitter. With so many machines, the workload was simply too great. "I've written down the specific requirements on a piece of paper. It's on the table. You guys could take your time when you don't have any missions." Han Xiao waved his hand and strode away, leaving the three of them looking at each other. The third Volga brother was in high spirits. He was not a sorcerer, so it was none of his business. He glanced at his two brothers gloatingly and left proudly. The other two looked at his swaggering back and only wanted to reward him with a magic light bomb. In theory, enchantments could be applied to most inanimate objects. Naturally, it could be applied to machines as well. Enchantment was also one of the life professions that mage players came with. In my previous life, most mages had part-time jobs in the enchantment profession to earn extra money. Water enchantments increased physical damage reduction, while evoking professions generally gave extra attack power. Han Xiao had temporarily reached his limit by using machines to strengthen his weapons. He was looking for a new way to strengthen them. Since there were mages in the team, he would try to make use of them. I'm currently level 95, 5 levels away from the level 100 promotion requirement. However, my mechanic main class is stuck at the class advancement requirement, and I'm required to learn 2 high-end knowledges. Sigh. I haven't even learned all the class advancement knowledges yet. Shaking his head, Han Xiao felt a little helpless. His main class had reached the 5th stage, which was level 65. When the players had a main class at this level, it would already be in version 20. The next class advancement would only be completed in version 30, and only then would they be able to come into contact with high-end knowledges. Even in version 30, the cost of learning high-end knowledges was extremely high. basically had to be exchanged from the faction store, and the players had to work very hard to accumulate enough favorability and money. The class advancement requirement that he had randomly obtained this time was not easy. Just the class advancement knowledges alone had taken him so much effort, and high-end knowledges were even harder to obtain. There was only one high-end knowledges for sale in the Garden Star System's regional exchange, and it was one of the more marginal ones. Even so, the price was tens of times higher than the class advancement knowledges. He had more than 100,000 anas, but he still could not afford it. There were two difficulties with this class advancement requirement. The first was money, and the second was the channel. The former required time to earn money, and the latter required time to slowly find sellers in the various star systems in the Shattered Star Ring. Very few mechanics were willing to share their knowledge, so Han Xiao felt that he would not be able to complete the class advancement in a short time, even with his identity as Floating Dragon. There's a class advancement requirement at level 100, so I might as well find a new subclass and raise it to level 100. I'll take a look at the class advancement requirement first. If it's convenient, I can complete it together with the class advancement requirement. Han Xiao pondered. The secret message bead triggered 3 large missions for me, all related to Ghidorah and Darkstar. I'll have to plan slowly and not act rashly before the next version. No, including the hidden mission on Erosia, it should be 4 high-difficulty missions. Erosia was very mysterious. She had awakened the energy Esper ability, and she seemed to be curious about Esper abilities. Han Xiao told Erosia to train her energy, and sometimes he would teach her personally. He realized that Erosia was very talented, and her body contained extraordinary potential. It was like a dormant treasure, and her Esper ability absorbed nutrients from it and grew very quickly. Han Xiao estimated that in less than a month, she would officially reach grade. He opened the forums and browsed through the players' posts as usual. He saw that among the Black Star mercenary players, someone had posted the process and difficulty of the level 90 dungeon. This was the first time that all the players had seen a dungeon that exceeded the level limit of the version, and it caused a lot of discussion. Han Xiao only knew the situation of the new dungeon after reading it once. He calculated in his mind. With his experience, level 60 players should have a chance to succeed and complete the dungeon with a very low success rate. Pork Bun posted a new video again. He realized that Pork Bun's new video was the 4th episode of the Black Star story. Han Xiao was surprised. He opened the video and roughly watched it. This episode continued the content of the previous episode, showing the second half of this mercenary incident. From Floating Dragon Island to Darkstar's pursuit, and then to the Dragon Emperor's power. Pork Bun still could not complete Battle, Power of the Dragon Emperor. He had already given up and had drawn this scene himself. Therefore, what the audience saw was a children's sketch. The colorful hand-drawn kindergarten drawings, coupled with Pork Bun's eloquent description, felt like a salesman holding a salted fish and insisting that it was an imperial sword. The Darkstar mothership saw that they were not friendly, so it screamed and fled in a hurry. Im stared and yelled, "Hey, don't you dare run." Then, she activated her Esper ability and used Mount Tai Crush. She grabbed the Floating Dragon Island beside her and threw it at the Darkstar mothership. All of a sudden, the sky changed color, and the two collided. It was like a rock hitting an egg. The mothership fell to the ground like a kite with a broken string. Pork Bun's tone was as if he was on steroids. His tone was even more excited than a salesman, as if he was narrating the battle of the century. However, the scene was extremely simple. A black matchstick man threw out a golden sphere with a dotted line behind it, which represented the trajectory of the sphere. It hit the black sphere that represented the Darkstar mothership, and then there was an onomatopoeic word bang beside it. The words were still red and bold. This person is AF * King Genius. I really picked up a ghost. Han Zhao's mouth twitched. As he expected, the density of the comments in this section could be said to be crazy. The audience's desire to complain was maxed out. Luckily, other than this, the scene changed back to a recording. When everyone returned to Uberly Hub, the incident came to an end. What the players saw was only the surface of the matter. They were all kept in the dark about the conspiracy behind Darkstar. Only Han Shao knew. Other than focusing on the scene of the Dragon Emperor showing her power, Pork Bun's other focus was on the new Black Star mercenary officer, or more accurately, Aroshia. In front of her, the three Volga brothers were completely transparent. After Ames attracted a lot of attention, Aroshia caused another craze. Her looks were even better than Ames, almost perfect. Although she did not have Ames' strength, status, temperament, and so on, she had her own charm. The fact that she had lost her memory made her very lovable and mysterious. Most importantly, she had breasts, and they were very big. As expected, the flat-chested party and the party with the flat chest reignited again. How could one conquer the world with a flat chest? How could one gather people with a flat chest? Although the Dragon Emperor is strong, beautiful, and has long legs, she's flat. White covers all ugliness. Flat destroys everything. Sorry, I've fallen in love with someone else. Not that I want to criticize you guys, but you're really bad. You're all brainless. What's so good about being big? Big is beautiful. These screen-licking monsters split into the Ames party and the Aroshia party, and they were having a great time arguing with each other. Han Shao was happy to see this. The more intense the argument was, the more popular the topic would be. After all, no matter how they argued, it would not affect him, a male human. After closing the forum, Han Shao started to think about his next plan of action. This time, I've been through a lot of trouble and gotten involved in a higher-level battle. I've caught the attention of Darkstar. It's best to keep a low profile for a while and accept missions to strengthen my current position. It's also a good time to save money. This time, in order to compress the technology, he had gone through a lot of danger. Han Shao was not prepared to take any more risks for the time being. He had fame, ability, and connections. His collaborators had provided him with many good missions. He decided to complete these missions one by one and accumulate them step by step. There was no need to rush. Furthermore, he was connected to the players. It was only version 10, and the players' abilities were limited. When the players grew in the next version, the benefits he received from the players would increase exponentially. Returning to the Stronghold Hall, all the players were there. When they saw Han Shao appear, they all surrounded him. Black Star, when are we going out for the next mission? Mad Blade asked. This group of players have been doing dungeons every day. They were almost bored from staying in the Stronghold. They could not wait any longer. Pack up. We're leaving today. On the way, Han Shao had accepted an employment invitation from his collaborators. It was not difficult, and the pay was good. Before the next version arrived, he was only prepared to accept such missions to accumulate wealth, strengthen his position, and develop in a low-profile manner. After such a huge incident, he had to maintain his health. Hearing this, the players were energized. They quickly picked up their things. More than 50 armored warriors stood in front of him in an orderly manner. Han Shao glanced at them, turned around, and walked out with large strides. The players followed closely behind him. Let's go. Han Shao had decided on his course of action. He accepted the employment invitation from his collaborators and was active in the various star systems of a Shattered Star Ring. After the popularity of Floating Dragon Island died down, the status and reputation of the mercenary group gradually built up through the missions. The Black Star mercenary ran around, busy with one mission after another. Time passed quickly. In the blink of an eye, 9 months had passed. Chapter 399. Planet Dawn, Ancient City Ruins in the Southern Territory. The allied forces of various tribes were gathered there. The 3,000 Blue Shield Knights of the Vane Kingdom, 5,000 Barbarian Berserkers of the Howling Barbarian Tribe, 1,000 Alchemy Bombardiers of the Earth Tribe, 500 Orcs of the Children of Listen, and the miscellaneous armies of the southern city-states and dukedoms. A total of 15,000 people were stationed in the green field outside the ancient city ruins. All kinds of flags fluttered in the cold south wind. There were no clouds in the sky. The sky here had the color of dusk, dyeing everything dark. The sun hanging high in the sky seemed very small and very far away from this planet. In the commander's meeting tent, the commanders of various armies gathered there and had an intense discussion. Only a tall man with light blue skin did not say a word. He was the leader of the Blue Shield Knights, Rex, the war hero of the Vane Kingdom. He went from a commoner to the commander of the trump card army of the biggest kingdom on Planet Dawn. His deeds were praised by the people of Planet Dawn. When everyone was almost done talking, Rex spoke with a deep voice. The commanders of the other tribes present respected him very much. They stopped arguing and listened to him speak. Rizar and his disciples are hiding under the ruins right now. They are preparing for the ritual to pollute the water. We still have about 6 hours, about 2.5 hours. In the ruins, there are about 800 high-level magic puppets that he spent 20 years to create. He has set up a complicated sealing magic circle. Only when all the magic puppets are destroyed will the passage to the ritual altar open. This means that we have to break through the magic puppet seal in a short amount of time, find their location, and stop the ritual. Otherwise, more than half of the Southern Territory's water source will lose its vitality, and hundreds of thousands of people will die because of this. Moreover, Rizar's church also has 100 polluters that can corrode our weapons and bodies. Even the most elite warriors can't withstand the corrosive spell. The situation is too difficult. It's very difficult for our 15,000 people to rush in a short period of time. Sigh. Rizar has been secretly preparing for 20 years. If we had discovered his scheme 10 days earlier, oh no, even 3 days earlier, we wouldn't be so passive. Now, we can only urgently gather the few of us, a commander said with a sigh. Rex said with a deep voice, this concerns the purity of the water source and the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. We cannot fail. The Nation Protector mages have contacted the Ascenders from the higher world, and the Ascenders have hired warriors from the higher world to help us fight. After saying that, Rex looked at the corner of the tent. A human wearing a red technological combat suit was sitting there. He looked completely different from the group of people wearing armor. Hearing this, he stood up and said, I'm the leader of the Red Horn Mercenary Group, Lin Ge. Your race has paid us. We will try our best to help you. Rex asked, Leader Ringo, are you confident? Ringo shook his head and smiled bitterly. To be honest, the situation here is much worse than what we were told when we accepted the mission. Our strength is limited, and we can't handle a mission of this level. The specific situation has been reported to the employer. The second batch of reinforcements is on their way. If they are fast, they should be able to arrive in 2 hours. Rex's face darkened, and he frowned slightly. Time is too tight. Are the reinforcements reliable? Don't worry. The second batch of reinforcements is much stronger than us. As long as they can arrive in time, solving the accident here will be a piece of cake. Their stronghold is in this star system. If not for this reason, they would not even bother to take action for small incidents like this. I hope so. Rex was very worried, but Ringo was very confident. Planet Dawn was located in the Garten star system, under Ghidorah's jurisdiction. This planet was very far away from a star. Even during the day, it was like dusk, hence the name. There was no moon at night, only darkness. There was no difference between seasons. Every day was very cold. Logically speaking, this should be a frozen planet that could not give birth to normal life. Life came from the rivers on the surface and underground. The natural water of Planet Dawn contained magic energy and had the characteristics of warmth. It dissolved the coldness of the entire planet and gave birth to plants and creatures. It was also called Origin Water by the races on Planet Dawn. Origin Water was the most important resource on the entire planet. The civilization of Planet Dawn was built on Origin Water. The changes and wars of the countries in history were basically all centered around Origin Water. Creatures drank Origin Water for a long time, and their bodies were very strong. The light blue-skinned Vanians were the main race. The ancient Vanian kingdom was the most powerful country on this planet. The existence of Origin Water determined that Planet Dawn was a magic-based civilization. The development of technology was slow, stable, and focused on the individual. The social structure had very obvious characteristics of a magic-based civilization. For example, people who could control magic had a higher social status. Although this was a surface civilization because it was also a magic-based civilization like Ghidorah, they were very similar and had a certain connection with the galaxy. Once a strong person reached a certain level of power, they could apply for Ghidorah's help and enter the higher world, which was the galaxy. This kind of powerhouse was known as an ascender. Throughout history, there had been hundreds of ascenders. Some of them had disappeared completely, while others would occasionally return and leave behind a communicator. This was also a holy object guarded by the protector mages, used to contact the ascenders. Not long ago, the Vanian kingdom discovered the conspiracy of the infamous pollution mage Razar. He wanted to use some kind of large-scale magic ritual to absorb more than half of the origin water in the Southern Territory so that he could obtain an unparalleled amount of magic power. Originally, the magic power of origin water would not dissipate for a long time. Even if it was consumed, it would recover in a natural cycle. However, this ritual would take away all the magic power of the origin water in an area, and the origin water that had lost all its magic power would need at least a few hundred years to slowly recover. The magic power of the origin water on the entire planet would be diluted because of this, causing the temperature of the planet to drop. Even if the origin water could circulate, it would still take time. If this area lost its support, it would be covered in frost within a month and become a land of death, causing hundreds of thousands of people to lose their homes or even die. In the ancient era, 1,000 years ago, someone had carried out the same ritual. This was the cause of the extreme northern wasteland on planet Dawn. It had not completely thawed yet. At that time, all the tribes worked together and killed the culprit after a fierce battle. They also destroyed the knowledge of this ritual. However, 1,000 years later, this ritual appeared again. Therefore, the Vanian kingdom urgently gathered troops, contacted other countries, and formed an alliance army. They went straight to the place where Razar was holding the ritual to prevent the same thing from happening to planet Dawn. Furthermore, the soil in the south was very fertile. If this place was also frozen, the food production would be greatly reduced, and thousands of people would starve to death in the future. Lin Ji's Red Horn mercenary group accepted the job of the Ascenders from planet Dawn and came here to solve the problem a few days ago. However, the number of magic puppets exceeded their expectations, so they had no choice but to ask for external help. To their surprise, an unexpectedly strong mercenary group was willing to help. This mercenary group was well known in the industry and had a strong background. People like the Red Horn mercenary group usually did not have the chance to interact with such a big shot. Lin Gu was relieved. With him around, this mission would be a success. Time was of the essence. Rex did not waste any more time. He gave the order, and the alliance army of all tribes set off. Rumble. The sounds of footsteps and beast hooves converged into a rolling torrent. The black mass of troops moved, rapidly approaching the ancient city ruins. From afar, one could see the dense dark green magic colossuses in the ruins. They had 4 arms, each holding a giant axe, and shone with a magical luster. Their texture was like stone, but also like metal. Just looking at them would make one feel that they were unshakable. Blue Shield Knight Legion, charge. Rex pulled down his visor and clamped his legs together. The knight's mount was a creature called the Stampede Beast. It had a snake neck and a horse body. Its 4 legs were bent backward. It roared and charged out. 3,000 Blue Shield Knights followed closely behind, facing the magic colossuses that were 3 times taller than them. Every knight's eyes were filled with fearlessness. The magic colossuses were controlled by someone. They quickly formed a formation and clashed with the charging knights. Bang, bang, bang. People fell and beasts tumbled. Sparks flew everywhere, and the scene instantly became chaotic. The other tribes also joined the battle. Swords and claws clanged against the magic colossuses. The roars were even louder than alchemy bombs. The berserkers and knights were at the front. The warriors' bones were broken by the magic colossuses, and they screamed in pain. The enemy's polluters hid behind the colossuses and released corrosive spells on the warriors. Only by destroying all the magic colossuses could the sealing magic circle be opened. Using human lives to fight against the magic colossuses often cost 13 to 18 elite warriors to destroy one magic colossus. Even with the help of the Red Horn mercenary team's firearms and abilities, the speed of killing the magic colossuses was not fast enough. The number of magic colossuses was more than the 800 they had expected. It was like a wall of despair. Red gradually spread across the green plains. The dusk sky witnessed this bloody battle. Continue charging, don't stop. The Night Legion, led by Rex, had already lost a quarter of its members, but they had also killed the most magic colossuses. With a determined expression, he circled out of the battlefield and charged back again. A spear pierced the leg of a magic colossus. The tip of the spear that contained the explosive enchantment exploded, shattering a small part of the magic colossus body. A magic colossus could flatten an army of hundreds of normal people. The Blue Shield Knight Legion was the elite army of the Vane Kingdom. Every knight was a warrior with magic power, and their strength was far beyond normal people. Such a heavy loss was already a huge blow to their vitality. At the same time, in a man-made space under the ancient city ruins, there was a huge altar with a strange shape. Countless believers in black were praying softly, injecting magic power into the magic circle of the altar. In the middle of the altar was an old Vanian wearing a bright red robe. This person was Rizar. A mirror with a golden frame was floating beside him. He had cast clairvoyance on it, and the mirror displayed the battle above him from a bird's-eye view. These idiots, they fell for your trick as expected. Those magic colossuses are specifically used to exhaust them. Our magic circle is hidden under the plains, and fresh blood is directed here. Only with enough fresh blood as fuel can we start the ritual. You tied the sealing magic circle to the magic colossuses. What a brilliant idea, forcing them to fight the magic colossuses head-on. A high-ranking believer said flatteringly below the altar. Rizar nodded and asked calmly, "How much fresh blood do we need?" "Another hour, and we will have enough fuel to start the altar. You will become the master of magic power, the strongest mage in history." The high-ranking believer had a fanatical look on his face. The strongest, Rizar looked at him with a pitiful expression, shook his head, and muttered to himself, 20 years of preparation. I'm finally going to succeed. I've been stuck at this level for so many years. This is the limit of my talent. As long as I cross this step, I will be able to go to the higher world. The battle on the ground lasted for almost an hour. In order to save time, the army almost gave up on defense. Under their crazy attacks, half of the magic colossuses were destroyed, and all the enemy corruptors were killed. However, the warriors also suffered heavy casualties. Blood flowed like a river, and the remaining people were exhausted. The battle losses were soaring at an alarming rate. Hang in there. At this rate, we can stop the ritual in time. Rex roared loudly to boost the morale. This time, he felt a chill above his head. A magic colossus got close to him and chopped down with its giant axe. Boom! Rex hurriedly jumped out. The running beast was split in half by the axe, and the blade of the axe was embedded in the ground. The running beast's blood and organs flowed all over the ground. If he did not dodge, he would have ended up like this. Before he had time to be scared, this colossus walked over with its axe raised. Its shadow covered Rex's head, and the axe was raised high. Rex felt a sharp pain in his leg. He was hit just now, and his face was covered in sweat. He tried his best to stand up. At the critical moment, he suddenly realized that the shadow under his feet seemed to have expanded. Then, there was a shrill sound that was getting louder and louder. Bang! An alloy airdrop cabin landed right beside this magic colossus. The shockwave sent both the magic colossus and Rex flying. Dong, dong, dong. Then, there was a series of landing sounds. Many airdrop cabins of the same style landed around them. Whoosh! The cabin door opened, and a group of warriors in heavy steel armor walked out. The leader was a human man in a black trench coat and many spherical accessories. He looked around curiously. Are these people the new reinforcements from the upper realm? Even though Rex had a calm personality, his eyes could not help but flash with surprise. At this moment, The magic colossus ran toward this human man and chopped down with its axe. Rex subconsciously wanted to shout to remind him, but the next scene made him swallow his words. He saw this man raise his hand, and with a slight drop of his wrist, he easily grabbed the axe that was enough to split a running beast in half. He raised his eyebrows. Wow, this planet's way of welcoming guests is so warm. We came at the right time. Don't just stand there, get to work. Lin Gu, who was fighting, looked over and heaved a sigh of relief. Chapter 400. Pew 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 pew. The professional players who followed the airdrop cabins raised their large-caliber armor-piercing cannons and fired at the dark green magic colossuses around them. A series of sparks exploded on the magic colossuses, and clouds of thick gray smoke burst out. In the endless steel storm, these magic colossuses that could take the charge of the knights head-on trembled and kept retreating. They could not even take a step forward, and their bodies kept shattering into pieces. In the past 9 months, they had gone through dozens of combat missions and had a lot of experience dealing with magic-type combat puppets. Although their numbers were much smaller than the army, they had taken over the battlefield. Haluz took out his battleship slicing blade and smashed a magic colossus with one slash. Orochia and the 3 Volga brothers stood beside Han Xiao and did not move. Han Xiao narrowed his eyes and looked at the battlefield. He stood where he was and did not plan to do anything himself. Haluz and this group of experts were enough to take care of the enemies. His subordinates' capabilities were up to standard, so he was very comfortable being a boss and not doing anything. To put it simply, this incident was a villain who wanted to cause trouble on a planet, so he was invited to take care of it. There were at least hundreds of similar incidents happening in the Shattered Star Ring every day, and the targets of the villains were all strange. They had experienced it many times and were used to it. They were very familiar with the process. The airdrop landed and started to clear the area. Han Xiao did not even need to command. He was proud. 9 months had passed, and he had deliberately controlled the size of Black Star. He still had the same number of people as before, but as his resume grew, he had a good reputation. He had cooperated with large mercenary groups such as Sky Ring, Blades, and Purple Gold. Although most of the missions were simple, he had a reliable performance when faced with difficult problems, and it did not take long for him to establish an impression of a reliable partner. Originally, most of the large mercenary groups only wanted to rope him in because of his floating dragon background, but they slowly acknowledged Black Star's ability. When the Colton Star Cluster needed external help, Han Xiao was often the first choice to be considered. When a mercenary group accumulated a certain amount of credit points, they would receive additional benefits. They would be listed in the list of teams with good credit points in that area by the backend system, and some emergency missions in that area would be automatically sent to Black Star. That was how Star Dawn's reinforcement invitation came about. Actually, he had just completed a guard mission with the Blades team the day before yesterday. According to habit, he should have rested for a while in the Uberly Hub stronghold. However, when he saw that it was an emergency on Planet Dawn, he decided to cancel his vacation and come over to work. This planet was one of the targets of the mutation disaster mission that had yet to be activated, so he came over to take care of it. The development level of the civilization on Planet Dawn is at the low magic level and has not reached the level of the magic industry. They place more emphasis on individual strength. Although they have sent some ascenders who should be grade B to Godora, the society's overall understanding of the galaxy is limited, even worse than planet Aquamarine, Han Xiao thought to himself. Every civilization had a different name for the galaxy. Planet Dawn called it the Higher World and Ascension, which showed that their civilization was more focused on the individual. Furthermore, most of the people did not understand the situation in the galaxy and only knew that it was a higher-level world. This was also because the kingdoms did not have such common knowledge. Darkstar had also placed the mutation source there. Now that 9 months had passed, it was almost time for the version 10 update. It was time to visit the other locations of the mutation disaster in version 20 to be mentally prepared. Blackstar, I've heard a lot about you. Brother Lin walked over, and his tone was filled with respect and fawning. With Blackstar's men participating in the battle, he was not worried about the battle at all. He took the opportunity to talk to Han Xiao and get to know him. Hello. Han Xiao extended his hand and shook his hand. Brother Lin was a little flattered. He had thought that this kind of person would be more arrogant and did not expect him to be so approachable. While the two of them were chatting, Rex crawled up from the ground, picked up his shield and spear, and took a deep breath. He did not have the time to communicate with the reinforcements and hurriedly joined the battle. His army had a chance to catch their breaths and regroup to cooperate with the players. The magic colossuses shattered one after another. With the help of a group of players, the battle ended very quickly. The remaining soldiers hurriedly bandaged their wounds and used the time to recover their stamina. Rex walked in front of Han, Xiao, and Brother Lin. With a solemn expression, he did not bother with pleasantries and said, "After destroying these magic colossuses, the door to the altar will open. Rizar's church is gathered there, and there are more enemies waiting for us. We do not have time to waste. Please follow us immediately." Rex saw how respectful Brother Lin was toward Han Xiao during the battle and knew that this group of new reinforcements had a strong background. His tone was filled with respect and caution. The guest from the higher world had always been mysterious in his eyes. He could not help but glance at the airdrop cabin and secretly guess how the people from the higher world used this thing to descend. He did not know the principle behind it. "Okay, let's end the chat here. Let's get to work." Han Xiao nodded. Since it was the employer's request, they would get to work first. After a simple rest, the Alliance army hurriedly entered the ruins to find a passage. They quickly found the entrance to the underground altar. This was an abandoned underground city that had been transformed into a secret base by Rizar and had been used secretly for many years. Everyone entered in a single file and followed the corridor all the way down. The underground city was not big, and the passageway was narrow. Rex had a large number of troops, so he could only leave a portion of them on the ground as sentries. Han Xiao and the others followed behind and wandered alone outside the army. This matter was very serious in Rex's eyes, but to him, it was very simple. Find a target boss, kill it directly, and the world would be peaceful. At the underground altar in the deepest part of the underground city, the mirror showed the scene of the army entering. The expressions of the hundreds of believers all changed. "Damn it, why is there another group of warriors from the higher world here? Our plan is ruined. The magic colossuses did not kill enough people, and the blood is not enough to activate the altar. It's over," the high-level believer said in a panic. Rizar could no longer remain calm. His expression became serious as he stared at Han Xiao and the others in the mirror. A hint of envy, yearning, and jealousy rose in his eyes. These people are all from the higher world. Soon, very soon, I'm about to become someone from the higher world too. Rizar had always thought that the people trapped on the planet were pitiful. The believers thought that Rizar carried out this plan to become the strongest mage. He scoffed at this saying. These ignorant believers did not know how vast the galaxy was. They were like frogs in a well, narrow-minded, pitiful. Perhaps in the eyes of the galactic residents, the galaxy was nothing much. However, to the people who looked up at the galaxy and could only use their imagination to describe the universe, being able to go to the galaxy was an extremely huge attraction. Furthermore, he knew for sure that there were other civilizations and races in the galaxy. His desire for knowledge and curiosity burned like a burning flame that could not be suppressed. This was the exploratory instinct of intelligent creatures. They wanted to improve and personally stand at the peak to see the scenery that they desired. When they did not have it, they often desired it very much. Rizar's goal had always been to go to the higher world. For this, he could do anything and ignore the consequences. However, the sudden arrival of the mercenaries from the higher world changed the plan that he had painstakingly prepared. If it were not for these people, his plan would definitely succeed. A deep madness appeared in his eyes. "Teacher, what should we do?" the high-level believer asked anxiously. Rizar lowered his head and looked at the restless believers under the altar. This was the team that he had spent decades building. A hint of coldness appeared on his old face, and he slowly said, "Lend me your flesh." His staff glowed with a demonic red light, and the stone pillars of the altar glowed with a bright red glow. A complicated magic circle appeared on the ground. At this moment, all the noise disappeared. The believers' eyes popped out, and their faces turned purple as if they were suffocating. They grabbed at their throats crazily, but their limbs did not listen to them. One by one, they fell to the ground and struggled crazily. Their bodies were twisted into countless strange postures. That high-level believer's face was filled with pain, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. He climbed up the altar with difficulty, and his trembling hand wanted to grab the hem of Razar's robe. However, his hand was only halfway there when his eyes suddenly exploded. Blood gushed out and dripped onto the ground, turning into long and thin bloodlines. Like long red earthworms, they automatically crawled to the base of the altar and seeped in. Hundreds of believers died abruptly. The blood in their bodies was drained by the magic array, and they turned into dry corpses with their mouths wide open and their faces sunken. The altar, which had absorbed the blood, became extremely smooth, like a gray jade. The scene that was still noisy just now was already dead silent. There was finally enough blood. Rumble, the altar buzzed, and the ritual was activated. The majestic magic power that contained the smell of blood constructed a special magic circle. Behind the altar was a vein of origin water. The slowly flowing underground origin water suddenly boiled, and tiny light spots floated on the surface of the water like fireflies. These were all magic power materialized. The light spots suddenly gathered into a few light dragons, and they were crazily absorbed by Razar through his facial features. Rex finally arrived with his troops 5 minutes later. He saw the altar and the dried corpses on the ground. When he saw that Razar was absorbing the magic power of the origin water, his expression turned as if he was facing a great enemy. *T. The ritual has started. We have to stop them immediately. Rex was about to call his troops and charge over. At this moment, magic buzzed around the altar. Defensive magic circles appeared on the walls, and colorful lights covered the altar. Thousands of defensive magic spells were stacked on top of each other, making it extremely sturdy. The ground rumbled, and 20 new statues crawled out from the ground, blocking the altar. Rex's expression changed drastically. With so many defensive magic spells and statues, he would not be able to charge over in a short time. He originally thought that he could stop the ritual after finding Razar, but now, he was blocked outside. Razar had planned for so long and could not afford to make any mistakes. Naturally, he had set up a large number of defensive measures. As long as he could hold off the enemy for a short while, he would be able to complete the magic power absorption ritual. Thousands of kilometers of origin water contained majestic magic power. This ritual was passed down from ancient times. It built a magic power source in one's body, which was why it could contain so much magic power and break through the limit of one's strength. If we let him complete the ritual, the Southern Territory will be finished. Quickly break these defensive magic spells and charge with me. Rex's tone was anxious. Before he could finish, someone pressed on his shoulder and interrupted him. Rex turned around and saw that Han Xiao had walked past him to the front of the troops. "You guys are too slow. Let me do it." Han Xiao's tone was unquestionable. He had the confidence of a professional. Different from the anxious Planet Dawn soldiers, he had a calm expression and did not care about these defensive measures at all. Clatter. The next moment, compressed orbs flew out one after another and spread out quickly. Hundreds of cannons of various types surrounded Han Xiao. The cannon fire instantly tore apart the layers of magic defenses. In front of him, these defensive spells were as fragile as paper. In 9 months, although Han Xiao did not change his combat system, he had strengthened it and increased the number of machines, making them more powerful. In less than 10 seconds, 20 statues were torn into pieces. The intertwining flames lit up the underground city as bright as day. The terrifying power that he suddenly unleashed shocked these soldiers. Rex's face was filled with shock as he mumbled, "What terrifying attack power, even stronger than the legendary Ascenders." Even the kingdom protectors do not have such strength. Is this the power of the warriors of the higher world? He had heard some secrets from the kingdom protectors. The warriors of the higher world were completely different from them, who only used magic power. They had all kinds of strange abilities. This was an eye-opener. The cannon fire easily tore apart the defensive spells and shattered the altar. The ritual was instantly interrupted. Rizar fell to the ground. He was shocked and furious, and his face was filled with disbelief. He did not expect that the defensive measures that he had set up for so many years would be completely torn apart in such a short time. The strength of this mercenary from the higher world was far beyond his imagination. However, the next moment, Rizar's expression changed. He felt the surging magic power in his body suddenly break through that layer of shackles. A new power was born in his body. His eyes widened, and tears suddenly flowed down his cheeks. I did it. I did it, although the ritual was interrupted not long after it started. Part of the magic power that he absorbed had already helped him break through the bottleneck and finally reach the standard set by Godora. He could now go to the higher world that he had always wanted. The increase in power gave Rizar the illusion that he could defeat all enemies with a wave of his hand. However, he did not want to fight. He turned around and was about to activate the explosive rune to make the underground city collapse. He would then leave through the secret passage. His heart was filled with excitement. His wish of many years was about to be fulfilled. However, plans were often the opposite of reality. Sensing the rapidly increasing energy reaction, Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. Yo, you broke through to grade B temporarily. But the next second, the Void Dragon mechanical suit instantly appeared. Han Xiao teleported to Rizar's side, pressed down on his head, and slammed it down. Bang! Before Rizar could react, his head was already in the ground. His staff slipped out of his hand and flew far away. The power that had just increased did not have any effect at all. The feeling of power only lasted for a few seconds before it was scattered. Chapter 4:01. His old face was stuck to the ground, and his beautiful robe was stained with dust. It was as if he was being pressed down by a mountain. Rizar could not move at all. He was both shocked and furious. Years of hope had finally appeared. He could not fall in the darkness before dawn no matter what. Even if the opponent was a strong enemy from the higher world, it was not impossible for him to fight now. Rizar activated his magic power. Bright red magic power mixed with blue magic power gushed out with his body as the center, creating an intense gale. The expressions of Rex and the other Planet Dawn soldiers who were 100 meters away all changed. Nidorm Repulsion Ring pushed away enemies within 10 meters and was used to deal with enemies at close range. It was a must-learn spell for Planet Dawn mages. Its power depended on the mage's ability. The ring released by Rizar was the strongest that Rex had ever seen. It was rumored that only Ascenders could have such powerful magic power. This meant that Rizar had reached that level. Rex's expression tensed up. This was troublesome. Prepare to throw spears as support. Rex ordered loudly. The Blue Shield Knights around him all raised their conical spears and prepared to throw them. In his opinion, Rizar had reached the level of an Ascender, so he should be on par with the warriors from the higher world, just in case he decided to help. However, when he turned around, he realized that the other mercenaries from the higher world were all calm and had no intention of attacking. Don't worry, Lin Gu said with a smile. Captain Blackstar's ability is well known in the mercenary circle of the Garten Star system. Rex was stunned. He took a closer look and saw through the backflow of magic power. No matter how powerful Rizar's magic power was, Han Xiao was still standing at the same spot, as steady as a rock. His outstretched palm pinned Rizar to the ground like a nail, not moving at all. At this time, Rizar suddenly felt that the mechanical suit's palm on his head started to generate a terrifying power that made him tremble in fear. It seemed like some powerful attack was about to be released at close range. His weak body would definitely not be able to take it. In his panic, he did not even bother to push Han Xiao away and hurriedly cast all sorts of defensive enhancements on himself. The next moment, gray energy mist appeared on the void dragon mechanical suit. It flowed along the arm and spurted out from the palm. Rizar's head happened to be in the palm, and he welcomed the first wave of power. Boom! Intense explosion. Gray fog gushed out. Like thousands of sharp blades, the gray shock waves spread out in all directions. The ground was instantly covered with gullies, as if it had been plowed. At the center of the explosion, there was a hole with a diameter of nearly 2 meters. Before the aftershock of the explosion dissipated, Han Zhao's body glowed with a gray light, and the second energy spray erupted. Void Jet. Even a lion would need to go all out to catch a rabbit. Even if the enemy was weaker, Han Zhao would not give him a chance and would still go all out. Although Rizar had broken through to Grade B and was at the same level as Han Zhao, he had only just reached the threshold and was not familiar with his own power yet. Han Technician dealt with this kind of newbie Grade B as easily as a father beating his son. He continuously shot out 3 Void Jet at full power, consuming 1,170 points of the mechanical suit's energy. 3 high damage numbers popped up above Rizar's head, dealing a total of 4,700 HP in just a few seconds. The killing efficiency was extremely high. This was the strongest explosive move without using Flaming Will. Flaming Will had a cooldown of 5 minutes, but Void Jet did not. It had already become Han Zhao's regular trump card. The smoke dissipated, and Rizar lay in the hole. His entire body was covered in wounds from the energy impact. Void Jet was a pure energy attack that contained the space attribute. Just like how the ice attribute could slow down and the fire attribute could burn, the space attribute's direct effect was to nullify part of the target's resistance and reduce the damage reduction. The damage in an extremely short amount of time was more than half of Rizar's HP. Rizar was heavily injured and unconscious. He even had a concussion. A Grade B mini-boss type character was easily defeated by Han Zhao in less than 10 seconds. After many battles in the past 9 months, Han Zhao already knew the various attributes and functions of the Void Dragon mechanical suit very well. Among the lightweight individual mechanical suits of the same grade, the Void Dragon mechanical suit was definitely one of the top. Against supers of the same grade, Void Jet was an extremely useful ultimate move. The difference in strength is actually this big. Rex's mouth was dry, and his eyes were filled with shock. Rizar, whose strength had increased tremendously, was already one of the top supers on Planet Dawn. Even 10 of him would not be able to defeat the current Rizar. However, in front of this mercenary, Rizar was like a baby who could not fight back at all. Are all the people in the higher world this strong? The soldiers of Planet Dawn were in a daze. A huge crisis in their eyes was resolved so easily. Everyone felt that it was unreal, as if they were dreaming. Han Zhao grabbed Rizar by the back of his collar and threw him in front of Rex. The mechanical suit folded automatically, and he returned to his casual clothes. The hundreds of cannons around him turned back into compressed orbs one after another. Pulled by the magnetic force, they rolled toward him on the ground. One by one, they lined up obediently and crawled back to his belt and the inner lining of his clothes along his legs. It was like hundreds of cannons returning to their nest and thousands of balls paying homage to their master. Done. Pack up. Han Zhao clapped his hands. With his current strength, it was not difficult for him to dominate Planet Dawn. One word, crush. As if waking up from a dream, Rex ordered his subordinates to tie Rizar up layer by layer with chains. He explained, "The king wants me to capture Rizar alive and bring him back for a public trial. He also wants me to interrogate him about where he learned the ancient ritual to prevent anyone else from knowing how to absorb the origin water. You guys can do whatever you want. My job is done." Han Zhao raised his eyebrows. At this time, Rizar slowly woke up. He was dizzy and realized that he was tied up by chains that suppressed magic. The magic in his body was forced to stay still and could not be used. He subconsciously wanted to struggle and resist, but he suddenly saw Han Zhao beside him and quickly stopped. As long as Han Zhao was beside him, resisting would just be asking for humiliation and suffering. However, he could not hold back his anger. He glared at Han Xiao and clenched his teeth. If it were not for this group of reinforcements from the higher world, he would have succeeded by now. Before this, he would never have expected the Vain Kingdom to be able to summon such powerful reinforcements. These intruders were the culprits that ruined his plan. Rizar was furious. "Why did you guys stop me?" "This has nothing to do with you guys," Han Xiao shrugged. "Why do you ask so many questions? It's all work. I've dealt with dozens of villains like you. What right do thieves have to complain about the police? If you want to blame someone, blame your bad luck for running into us when you were committing the crime. What's your motive?" "I just don't want to be trapped on a backward planet forever. Can you understand the feeling of disillusionment and surprise when I found out that we're just one of the countless races in the universe? We're not special, but it also means that we have a lot of companions. I don't want to be ignorant and backward forever. I don't want to stay here and wait for death like the people on this planet. I want to see the real world. Since my ritual has failed, there is no need for you to deal with me anymore. Aren't you mercenaries? If they can hire you to deal with me, I can hire you too. Please take me away from Planet Dawn. I can give you all my wealth as a reward. If you don't need it, I can also work for you." Rizar said as he tugged on the chains, making a rattling sound. Rizar was still trying his best. The soldiers beside him could not help but become nervous when they heard that. They were afraid that the mercenaries from the higher world would betray them. Han Xiao did not hesitate and rejected the new mission, Rizar's request, that popped up on the interface. "Sorry, we Black Star are a trustworthy mercenary group. Furthermore, even if you have a good reason, it's not an excuse to harm the planet," he said calmly. Rizar was angry and helpless. He did not say anything and let the soldiers pull on his chains. Back on the ground, the army gathered and rested. They were about to return. Rex found Han Xiao and said solemnly, "Captain Blackstar, Captain Lin Gu, on behalf of the Vain Kingdom, I would like to invite all of you to the palace as guests. The king wants to thank you personally. I wonder if you guys have the time?" "Sure, then we'll go with you guys. We could take a look around Planet Dawn." Han Xiao nodded. Of course, this was an excuse. His main goal was to get information about the signs of the mutation disaster. Going through the upper world was the most convenient way to gather information. Since the king had come to him personally, he would not miss it. "I'll stay too. Let's go together." Lin Gu originally did not want to stay, but when he saw Han Xiao agree, he quickly changed his mind. His goal was to stay with the Black Star mercenary a little longer and make his presence known. The Alliance army quickly cleaned up the battlefield, and the tribes left separately. The Blue Shield Knights escorted Rizar and headed toward the Vain Kingdom. Late at night, the Blue Shield Knights were stationed on a plain. The night on Planet Dawn was very dark, and one could not even see their own fingers. Most of the creatures in the wild were dark creatures, and light had the effect of dispelling wild beasts. The Knights' temporary camp was equipped with fluorescent lighting spells as a light source. The weak fluorescent light floated in the camp, and they could barely see. Rizar was locked in a prison van in the middle of the camp. The guards around him kept changing shifts and keeping an eye on him. Late at night, in a single tent, Han Xiao turned on his galactic communicator and looked at the mercenary hiring interface. Chapter 402. Black Star Mercenary Credibility Points. 875. High Credibility Level. Total Size. 173 Grade D. 39 Grade. 132 Grade B. 2 missions completed. 76 Main Area of Activity. Colton Star Cluster History. Senile Defense Battle. Silver Rescue Operation. Rosai Planet 95. 12 Exploration. Ubuli Hub laid on. Large Stargate Maintenance Guard. Note: eliminating parasitic space-eating bugs. Pursuit of Purple Fungus Civilization Rebel Leader Pilipalapa Wisasa. There are 71 missions left. Collapse/Expand. Founder: Black Star. Han Xiao Date of Creation. Year 688. October 2 Overall Evaluation. Small to medium-sized mercenary group. They have a good reputation, high credibility, and strong abilities. They have completed many missions with high ratings. Most of the mercenaries under them are immortal. They have a cooperative relationship with many large armies. They are stationed in Uberli Hub, all year round and are often in charge of the surrounding affairs. They are under the command of Ames, the Dragon Emperor. They are a reliable, mercenary group active in the Colton Star Cluster. In the past 9 months, the Black Star mercenaries' history had increased by quite a bit. With the players as his combat strength, he did not lose any manpower and could even maximize his gains. It was very convenient. In the past 9 months, he had only done cooperative missions and kept a low profile, earning quite a lot of money. His savings had reached 784,000 anus. Other than buying some materials, metals, and parts to build new machines, he had saved the rest to complete his class advancement mission. With so much money, buying 1 high in knowledge was not a problem, but 2 would be a little difficult. According to the standards of galactic mercenaries, the missions on Planet Dawn were very simple, so the reward was naturally not high. However, he did not accept this mission just for the reward. Because Han Xiao was preparing to find out more about the mutation disaster on Planet Dawn, he had let the spaceship that was hovering outside the atmosphere of Planet Dawn leave first during the day. He had hitched a ride there. It was good to have more partners. Traveling was free, and it was even better than DD to spaceship. The faint light from the communicator screen shone on his face. The light and shadow were 3-dimensional and unpredictable. It'll be the International League in a few days. Once we're done here, let's bring the team back to Ubailey Hub. 3 months ago, well, that's more than 2 weeks ago for the players, the Tournament Alliance released the rules for the first international finals. They said that the shop had set up a gathering crystal that was specially bought for the shortlisted players from various countries. The effect was similar to the dungeon crystal. The players would gather from each planet to a simulated competition venue, and the competition would be broadcasted live. He was convinced by this taste. He walked into the forest in fear and tiptoed, ready to turn and run at any moment before he saw anything unclean. He turned on his night vision mode and carefully looked at the scene in the forest. Rizar was tied up tightly with chains that suppressed magic. A few knights surrounded him, holding steel swords. Their lips were moving as if they were saying something. Han Xiao turned up the sound collection function of his combat suit and heard their conversation. I'll ask you one last time. Where did you get the ritual method? I found a stone tablet in the ruins of an ancient underground city. The incomplete ritual method was written on it. I used blood as the power to change the spell. How many times do you want me to say it? Who else knows about this spell? Not a single one. After I memorized the spell, I destroyed the stone tablet. Do you think I would tell others about such a dangerous spell? It's only safe in my hands. Rizar had an impatient expression as he answered the knight who asked the question in front of him. This knight rubbed his hands and suppressed his excitement in his tone. How about this? Let's make a deal. You tell me the ritual method, and I'll let you go. To tell you the truth, I'm also very interested in the higher world. Hee. Rizar's eyes lit up as if he had grabbed onto his last life-saving straw. Haha, there's always a way out. Immediately after, Rizar thought for a while. A mocking smile appeared on his face. From his perspective, he felt that if he told them the method, these people would definitely kill him. He secretly raised his guard and asked, "How do I believe that you're not trying to trick me into telling you the spell?" The knight in front of him said, "We're the guards on duty at this time. If you die, it'll be very easy to track us down. Then, you're not afraid that I'll kill you after I escape?" Rizar narrowed his eyes. "Humph, do you dare? Once there's a magic wave, those mercenaries from the higher world will come and finish you off. Then, if I run, won't you be tracked down too? Hee, you don't have to worry about that. What if you immediately call for help after you let me go? Then you can rat us out." After this conversation, Rizar gradually believed that these knights did want to make a deal with him. His tense nerves relaxed a little. His attention was on arguing with the knight in front of him, so he did not notice that the knights behind him quietly raised their steel swords and aimed at his vital parts. Even if Rizar was grade B, his life would still be in danger if he was pierced by a steel sword while his ability was suppressed. Han Xiao secretly observed, and his eyes flashed. He originally thought that these knights were after Rizar's spell, and the deal was almost done. Why did they suddenly want to kill him? Seeing that these knights were about to make a move, Han Xiao thought for a while and walked out. Hearing the footsteps, everyone present suddenly turned around. When they saw who it was, they were all shocked. Rizar's expression changed drastically. "Why is it you again?" If the conversation just now had been heard, the fire of hope that had been raised with much difficulty would have been extinguished by a piss. Han Shao glanced around and realized that although these knights were shocked, they did not panic because their private deal was exposed. "What's going on?" Han Shao decided to ask first. You heard it?" a knight asked carefully. "Guess." Han Zhao's gaze landed on his steel sword. "Kill him." The knight roared, turned around, and stabbed Rizar in the chest. Blood splattered everywhere. Han Zhao's expression was weird. He thought that these knights wanted to attack him. What was going on now? Rizar's eyes widened. Before he could react, the other knights also stabbed him with their swords. Han Zhao's figure flashed, and these knights only felt their vision blur. Their bodies flew into the air and were instantly kicked away by Han Shao. "Although I don't know what's going on, I'll stop you guys first." Han Shao glanced at Rizar. This guy was kneeling on the ground, his face pale, and he was panting heavily. Although he was a master mage, his endurance was more than 100, so he would not die. The steel sword did not pierce deep, but probably pierced through his lungs, making it difficult for him to breathe. "Can anyone explain?" Han Shao glanced to the knights. Everyone pursed their lips and did not say anything. Turning around and looking deep in the forest, Han Shao said to the darkness, "The one hiding, they're not talking, so you explain it to me." Approaching footsteps sounded in the forest. Rex, who had been hiding at the side for a long time, walked out with a serious expression. When Han Shao appeared, he knew that he could not hide anymore. Taking a deep breath, Rex slowly said, "These knights are my trusted subordinates. I arranged for them to be on duty together. I brought him here to kill Rizar." Han Shao raised his eyebrows. "Didn't you already capture him? Why do you still need to assassinate him? You could just kill him openly." Rex shook his head. "The king want me to capture him alive, put him in jail for a public trial, and put him in jail. Captain Blackstar, you're not from our kingdom, so I'll be honest with you. For a criminal like Rizar, who has ascended level, the kingdom's upper echelons will very likely hand him over to Ghidorah's emissary in exchange for something. This way, Rizar will live and go to the higher world as he wished. I don't want to give someone like him, who almost killed millions of citizens for his own selfish reasons. Also, Rizar knows the ritual to absorb the origin water. Maybe someone in the kingdom has selfish motives and will force him to tell us the ritual spell and let him live. This kind of terrifying spell has the risk of spreading. Once this happens, there will be a similar crisis. Therefore, even if I have to disobey the king's orders, I cannot let him reach the capital alive. As long as I kill him like this, I can use the excuse that Rizar escaped and was killed by us. Captain Blackstar, I'm very grateful for your timely help, but this is our kingdom's matter. Please don't interfere." Rex's tone was stern. Although he knew that he was no match for Han Shao, he had no intention of backing down. Han Shao was enlightened. "Oh, so that's how it is. The deal is a trick to distract Rizar. You have some ideas." He sized up Rex. He was so righteous and righteous. Was he another main character? Or did you make up an excuse long ago and put on an act in front of me? Han Zhao's eyes turned. He pointed at Rizar and said, "Since you don't want him to go back alive, why don't you give him to me? That way, it'll be easier for you to die." "What do you want him to do?" Rex frowned. "Don't ask. Anyway, I will bring him to the galaxy, the higher world far away from you guys. I will never let him come back." Hearing this, Rizar was overjoyed. His dream was to go to the higher world. He was already in despair, but he did not expect to see a glimmer of hope at the end of the tunnel. However, when he looked up, he saw Han Shao smiling at him. There was an indescribable meaning in the smile. It was malicious and seemed to be emitting a chilling aura. Rizar shivered for some reason. The excitement he just had quickly cooled down. Chapter 403. Boom! The explosion woke up the night. The Blue Shield Knights in the camp walked out of their tents and looked at the forest not far away in shock. Thick smoke was rising. They turned around and saw that Rizar, who was in the prisoner carriage, was missing. They were shocked. The prisoner escaped. At this moment, someone shouted. The knights hurriedly picked up their shields and steel swords and rushed to the scene of the explosion. After entering the forest, they saw Han Xiao standing in front of a huge pit. Inside the pit were charred body pieces that looked like charcoal. They could not see the human form. Rex hurried over with a serious expression. What happened here? Your prisoner almost escaped, but I found out. Han Xiao shrugged. You saw it yourself. I accidentally went overboard. Rizar was strangled to death. The knights who rushed over were shocked. Rex's expression changed. He shook his head and said, The king wants him alive. He wouldn't have died, but he sought his own death. What a pity. As the commander, he settled this matter with a few words. He pretended to severely punish a few guards and then ordered the knights under him to go back to sleep. Seeing this, the others did not pursue the matter. Since Rizar was strangled to death, there was no need to escort him. They did not have to be nervous on the way. Many people heaved a sigh of relief and secretly felt refreshed. Most of them had the same thoughts as Rex. They wanted to kill Rizar. Some of the knights' hometowns were in the southern territory, and Rizar almost killed their families in the countryside. If it were not for the warriors from the higher world, the consequences would have been unimaginable. An attempted crime could not be treated as if nothing had happened. A few veterans who had been with Rex for a long time sensed something and looked at Rex meaningfully. They understood their superior. This escape was probably planned and put on a show for the king and nobles who wanted to capture Rizar alive. Killing Rizar was to prevent anyone from harboring evil intentions. Rex had a very high reputation in the army, and he was loved by everyone. The soldiers did not have a good impression of nobles, so they had a tacit understanding and pretended not to know anything. After everyone left, Rex nodded at Han Xiao and left together with him. Han Xiao did not return to the camp. Instead, he walked far away. In the dark night, he came to the back of a small hill. Rizar was thrown there. Haluz crossed his arms and guarded beside him. In the end, Rex still handed Rizar over. Although he really wanted to kill Rizar, he did not have much choice in front of Han Xiao. He could only believe what Han Xiao said. How is he? Han Xiao asked. The wound on his chest has been bandaged. He won't die, Haluz replied. Very good. I'm going to follow the knights to the king's capital. You stay in the wilderness with Rizar. After I'm done, we'll call the spaceship and leave together. Haluz nodded. He then sized Rizar up and asked in confusion, Black Star, do you want to recruit this mage? He's not a good person. Do I look like I lack people? Han Xiao patted his back and said, Don't forget, I promised to bring hundreds of thousands of super warriors to solve the problem of Sunil. I don't like him. All right, I'll listen to you. I'll stay and guard him. If he tries to run, I'll cut him in half. Haluz trusted Han Xiao a lot. He knew that his fate was tied to Han Xiao's. Back then, he had only joined Black Star with a skeptical attitude. After so many things, he firmly believed that Han Xiao had the ability to fulfill the promise he made when he first recruited him and changed the future of his race. Since you're not recruiting him, what do you want him to do? Haluz asked. Rizar looked up at Han Xiao. His old face was filled with fear. He did not know what was waiting for him. Just watch. Han Xiao took out a small suction cup device. There were many tiny needles in the center of the suction cup. He pressed them on the blood vessels on Rizar's arm. The needles were inserted into the blood vessels and slowly drew out blood. Gradually, they had a faint glow of magic. Rizar suddenly felt the magic in his body flowing away. He looked at the device on his arm that looked like a blood-sucking bug. This thing was drawing out his magic. No. He tried to struggle, but his strength was quickly disappearing. His magic was continuously disappearing. Very soon, the wrinkles on Rizar's face increased rapidly. It was as if he had aged 10 years. A sense of weakness spread throughout his body. It was as if he had returned to his childhood, when he was still an ordinary person. The magic in his body had dried up, and he seemed to have turned back into an ordinary person. Where's my power? Give me back my power. He had only obtained the power of an ascender for less than half a day. He had not even properly experienced it yet, and had already lost the power that he had obtained with much difficulty. Rizar broke down. Even when the plan that he had worked on for 20 years failed, he was not as desperate as he was now. Power was the foundation that supported his confidence, and Han Xiao had taken away his foundation. After losing his power, Rizar's temperament seemed to have turned back into that of an ordinary person. No, he was even worse than an ordinary person. He cried and begged. Han Xiao shook his head. Some people had power and could do whatever they wanted. Once they lost their power, they would become cowards, strong on the outside but weak on the inside. The device in his hand was this super gene extractor experimental model that he had obtained from the Dark Star's secret message bead. When Herluz saw this thing, he shivered. Put away. I'm scared. A few months ago, Han Xiao had tested the effect of the extractor. The first test subject was Madblade. The effect of using it on players was to absorb 20 to 50 random attribute points and a certain amount of energy, which would be added to the user. The effect lasted from 10 to 120 minutes. In his previous life, the Super Gene Extractor was in the hands of Dark Star. Players could only obtain the damaged Super Gene Extractor by completing the related high difficulty missions. The effect was similar to the one he had, but it was weaker. The practicality of the extractor in battle was very low because it needed to be in contact with the target's body to be effective. Most people had physical or magical armor, so it was difficult for it to be effective. Plus, the prerequisite was to control the enemy and make them not move. The prerequisite was very strict. However, the hidden function of the extractor had to be effective when the target was unprotected. The examples of unprotected states were hibernating, captured, paralyzed, willing, and so on. This meant that the target was under one's complete control. If the player was unlucky enough to be affected, they would enter a 12-hour period of weakness, which was commonly known as sheep's tail. Their attributes would decrease by 30 to 90 points, depending on the power of the extractor. If an NPC was affected, not only would they be weakened, but they would also produce an ability potion. After drinking it, they would temporarily obtain a certain ability of the target, which would appear as a temporary character summon card on the player's interface. The second test subject that Han Xiao obtained this result was Herluz. Herluz clearly remembered the fear and weakness he felt when his power was taken away. He had only endured a small amount of damage, but it still took him a few days to recover. This thing that could take away the genes of supers was the natural enemy of supers. Just how many supers have been destroyed by the organization that created this device? Han Xiao took out 3 empty tubes and stored the blood extracted by the device. You have received Ability Potion X3. He directly drank a tube of it. The sweet and fishy taste filled his mouth, and the warm blood flowed down his throat. It was very choking. Then, a unique warmth of magic power rippled through his body. You have received Character Summon Card. Rizar, Temporary. Character Summon Card. Rizar, Temporary. Origin Water Magic Power. Temporarily obtain power that exceeds one's own. Plus 20 all attributes. Duration, 5 to 15 minutes. Number of uses, 0 to 1. This character summon card's duration, 15 days. Buff bonus, not a bad ability. Han Xiao was very satisfied. Rizar's loss of magic power was only temporary. It was just that this crying old man himself did not know about it. This meant that Han Xiao could continuously take advantage of him and mass-produce ability potions. Although the temporary character summon card ability would be different every time, Han Xiao believed that the players would pay for this new product. In Han Xiao's previous life, Darkstar had also used the Super Gene Extractor to carry out this plan. The difference was that Han Xiao would not randomly grab people and use them as batteries. The temporary character summon card was just icing on the cake for him. He would not force it. He would only do it when he met someone he could do it with a clear conscience. I remember you begging me to bring you to the higher world. I'll agree to it now. Han Xiao's smile was like a demon in Rizar's eyes. This old man trembled, and his face was filled with fear and begging. Going to the higher world like this was completely different from what he had imagined. Deep regret rose from his heart and climbed up to his eyes. You're a demon. Rizar wanted to roar, but he could only make a weak sound. Han Xiao was amused. You're the one complaining first? 2 days later, the Blue Shield Knights returned to the capital. This city was located on a plain. A origin river separated the city in the middle, making it the West Bank and the East Bank. It also separated the classes. On the East Bank were the noble mansions and palaces. They were exquisite and luxurious. On the West Bank was the crowded civilian area. There were many castles, and all kinds of arches and sewage pipes formed complicated streets. Only those who had lived here for more than a decade remembered the route. Normal people would completely get lost after walking around a few times. It was noon. The sun was the size of a soybean hanging in the sky. The light was dim, giving the city a dark yellow color. The buildings and streets covered each other, and the light and shadows were scattered. It was like dusk when the sun was setting. However, this was the brightest time of the day on planet Dawn. Rex brought everyone to the East Bank and stayed near the palace. The officer came to welcome them. Facing these guests from the higher world, the officer's attitude was even more respectful than when he was facing the king. He almost wanted to lower his head to the ground. On behalf of the Vane Kingdom, I welcome all of you to Planet Dawn as guests. His Majesty has invited all the warriors from the higher world to attend the palace banquet. He hopes that all of you will do him the honor. At that time, our ascenders will communicate with all of you through the Kingdom Protector Mages and pay the remuneration for this employment. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Of course, no one had any objections. Chapter 404. At night, the palace was brightly lit. Everyone accepted the invitation and changed into exquisite formal attire brought by the steward to attend the banquet. The palace attendant led the way, and everyone came to the garden courtyard. It was already set up as an open-air banquet venue. The bright and warm firelight dispelled the darkness of the night. Exquisite food was placed on the long tables. There were green, yellow, and purple vegetables and fruits, fragrant roasted meat from unknown beasts, sweet pies overflowing with fresh milk, and light blue clear wine brewed from origin water. The attendants carried plates and shuttled among them. The musicians sat in the center and played strange instruments. The notes danced happily on the strings while the light blue-skinned Vanian nobles chatted with each other in the courtyard. The banquet had just started. There was a pavilion in the corner of the courtyard. The Vanian king and the high-ranking nobles were sitting in it. They kept looking at the path in the courtyard. When they saw the arrival of the upper world warriors, the king cleared his throat and stood up. "Welcome to the banquet. I'm Gallo Mio. Thank you for your generous help," said the king. Mio meant king and leader in the Vanian language. It was also how the king addressed himself. King Gallo was a rather sturdy middle-aged man. As he thanked them, he walked down from the pavilion and welcomed them personally without any arrogance. The other nobles stopped talking and bowed to Han Shao and the rest. In front of the guests from the upper world, they knew that their noble status was meaningless. This was a difference in level. It was similar to how the chiefs of a primitive tribe faced the guests from a civilized city, but the difference was even bigger. The upper world warriors were powerful dragons that could ignore the local snakes. Lingo looked like he was following Han Zhao's lead. Han Shao had no choice but to answer as the leader. He said a lot of polite words like it was a small matter. Then, King Gallo tried to get closer to them and said a few jokes that were not funny at all. The nobles burst into laughter as if it was some extremely funny joke. A group of kingdom protectors walked out with a galactic communicator in their hands. They were so careful as if it was some kind of holy item. After a few operations, the virtual projection of an ascender appeared in the middle of the courtyard, causing the Vanians to exclaim in shock. Han Shao heard an old noble beside him say to his son, "Cherish this moment. Only when important guests arrive can we see such a miracle." The eldest Volga curled his lips. These people have never seen the world. The second brother glanced at him coldly. Were we like this when we were young? The eldest brother was speechless. He snorted and stopped talking. He turned around and saw the third brother gnawing on a beast's leg happily, oil dripping from his mouth. King Jia Lu exchanged a few words with the ascender. The ascender thanked everyone for their help and transferred the reward to everyone's account. Then, he ended the communication. King Jia Lu smiled and said, "Please enjoy the food and wine to your heart's content. This will be a wonderful night." The host and guests enjoyed themselves, and everyone blended into the atmosphere of the banquet. Different civilizations and races had their own cultural customs. Everyone followed the customs. From time to time, nobles would come over to chat with them. Their attitudes were cautious and curious. There were also programs at the banquet. Not long after, a group of dancers came on stage and shuttled through the crowd. Han Xiao did not have any feelings for these blue-skinned Vanians. He drank a few mouthfuls of origin water wine and turned around to see Erosia staring at the dining table, as if she was hesitating whether to eat or not. Han Xiao walked over and habitually put his arm around her shoulders. He glanced at her and said, "There haven't been any battles recently, so you don't need to use your abilities. Eat something." Erosia ignored Han Xiao's actions and picked up a purple fruit. She bit her lips and hesitated. She did not need to eat to survive. She would automatically absorb the free energy in the environment to maintain her own consumption. This was the characteristic of an energy life form. However, Han Xiao was curious about how she would feel when she ate, so he teased her to eat some food. Although Erosia did not feel hungry when she tasted the delicious food, she felt that eating was a very interesting thing. Eating became her entertainment activity. Compared to the ignorant and extremely calm personality 9 months ago, the current Erosia had more human characteristics. Erosia's digestive ability was very powerful. All the food would be broken down into energy without leaving a single residue, so she did not need to excrete. However, a strange accident happened. The energy transformation could only be used on herself and could not be applied to external objects. Before the food was completely digested, the energy transformation would lose its physical form, and the residue in her stomach that had not been completely digested would fall out in the form of sputtering. At that time, everyone was about to start a battle with a group of enemies. This scene shocked both sides. Everyone looked at the sputtering food residue under the energy transformation and fell into deep silence. Ever since then, Erosia would count the days with her fingers before she ate, calculating whether or not she would need to use her Esper ability before the food was digested. Oh, her Esper ability's strength was increasing rapidly, not losing out to the players at all. It had already reached C+, and she was only half a grade away from the mission requirement of grade B. After picking up and putting down the fruit several times, Erosia finally took a bite of the fruit and showed a happy expression. She handed the fruit that she had taken a bite of to Han Xiao and said, "It's delicious. Try it." Han Xiao took a bite, and his face suddenly wrinkled. He pushed Erosia's hand away and said, "It's sour. You have such a strong taste. Keep it for yourself." Han Xiao guided her to train her energy. After getting along for a long time, Erosia became closer and closer to Han Xiao. The interaction between the two was very intimate, but there were no improper thoughts. Han Xiao did not treat Erosia as a normal female creature at all. In his eyes, she was an energy body without gender, very pure. Erosia herself did not feel like a female, so it was very natural for her to put her arm around his shoulder. Walking to the side, Han Xiao estimated that it was about time. He found King Gallo and said that he wanted to talk. King Gallo invited Han Xiao into the pavilion and asked with a smile, "Captain Blackstar, what do you want to talk to me about?" Han Xiao lowered his voice and said, "It's like this. I want to ask you about a situation. To tell you the truth, I have a special intuition ability. When I arrived, I felt that there seemed to be some kind of virus from the galaxy existing on planet Dawn." King Gallo was shocked. He sat up straight and said, "You're saying that our planet is infected with some kind of disease?" No, this is just a feeling. I still need you to check if there are any large-scale similar symptoms recently. Only then can we confirm whether there is a virus or not." King Gallo took it very seriously. He ordered the affairs officer to organize the intelligence of the various territories. The Vane Kingdom had existed for many years and had a very large intelligence network. Every time, the lords would submit reports about their territories, so it was very convenient to collect them. Not long after, the affairs officer returned to the banquet courtyard and organized a few pages of reports. King Gallo took a look, shook his head, and said, "They are all normal infectious diseases. There doesn't seem to be any large-scale new symptoms." Han Shao raised his eyebrows and said, "It might not be an illness. It could also be an abnormal behavior, such as drowsiness." King Gallo was stunned. Who would check their sleep for no reason? Everyone would close their doors and sleep. Who would talk about the quality of their sleep the night before? There was no record of the sleep situation of the people. King Gallo suddenly thought of something and said, "The mine production of the various territories this year has decreased by 16% compared to last year, but the mine veins have not dried up. Plus, there are more miners than last year. The only factor that can affect the production seems to be working hours. Could it be related to this? Maybe." Upon hearing that, Han Shao took another look at King Gallo. To be able to find a hidden connection from a seemingly unrelated matter, this king seemed to be quite capable. The incubation period of the mutation virus was very long, and there were many ways for it to spread. The early symptoms of the infected were drowsiness, and they became more and more prone to drowsiness. The symptoms would continue to worsen, and, at most, they could sleep for 2 to 3 days. At that time, the mutation virus was about to break out. The higher the growth rate of the virus, the shorter the incubation period, and the more severe the symptoms. It could even skip the drowsiness and enter the next stage. "I wonder how Blue Star is doing now," Han Shao thought to himself. King Gallo was a little worried and asked if there was a solution. Han Shao shook his head and said that he did not know what it was, but they had better be careful. Then he left. Han Shao had already obtained the information he wanted and reminded King Gallo so that Planet Dawn would not be caught off guard. After all, this planet was also one of the mission targets. During the incubation period of the mutation virus, Han Shao did not have any solution unless he was willing to give up on the mutation disaster mission that had not started yet. Furthermore, he had to take a huge risk and hand over the 7th generation of the mutation virus to Ghidorah to create the antidote before the disaster happened. He also had to face Ghidorah's suspicions and interrogation. Doing so would be too much of a loss. He could only wait until the disaster happened and cause a commotion. When Ghidorah and Darkstar officially clashed, only then would he be able to bring out the greatest value of what he had. "The only thing I can do to prepare for the mutation disaster is to increase my own combat strength. I will have to wait for the right time for everything else." The next day, Han Shao rejected King Gallo's invitation again and left the king's capital. He called for a nearby partner spaceship in the wilderness, picked up Haluz and Razar, and returned to Uberly Hub. Brother Lin received Han Zhao's communicator number and happily left with his men. The Black Star mercenary could be considered a celebrity in Uberly Hub. He finally enjoyed the treatment of the Sky Ring army that he had seen when he first came to Uberly Hub a year ago. He did not need to line up, and he had priority in many services. As the group walked on the road, many mercenaries and passers-by looked at them kindly and nodded. After returning to the stronghold, Han Shao knocked Razar unconscious and placed him in an empty room to be used as a prison. He left him there for the time being, as there was something more important that he needed to pay attention to. The International League would begin in 3 days. The International League was split into 2 stages. The first round was the regular season, where all the participants would be split into groups and take turns to battle. The top 8 teams with the highest points would enter the international finals, and the top 16 teams with the highest points would enter the singles competition. The second stage of the finals would be a fight to the death. The winner of the best of 5 would be decided in the end. On the Chinese side, the qualified teams were King Admiral's Dynasty, Hao Tian's Long Sky, and Li Ji's Temple of God. As for the singles competition, the participants were King Admiral, Snowflower, and Mad Blade's Raging Sword. The other professional players who did not make it into the finals would train with them day and night, generously lending their equipment to the participants. At such an important moment, everyone put down their daily grudges and were united. The clubs of every country were like this, giving the best equipment and skills to the participants. Every participant had the best essence. This was their first time appearing in an international league. Other than King Admiral, who was the calmest, the other participants were more or less nervous. Not only them, the professional players of every country had the same mentality, nervous and expectant. With the big event approaching, the passion of the players was ignited again. The forums were filled with information about the clubs of every country. All sorts of analysis and prediction posts were posted. Compared to the regional league, the excitement of the international league was even higher. Players from different countries discussed it together, and the forums were very lively. Port Bun was the first to enjoy the benefits of being in a favorable position. He temporarily stopped the Black Star chapter that had already been done for 16 episodes and made a special chapter to interview the Chinese participants in a mercenary group before the competition. Chapter 405. Boom! The explosion woke up the night. The Blue Shield Knights in the camp walked out of their tents and looked at the forest not far away in shock. Thick smoke was rising. They turned around and saw that Rizar, who was in the prisoner carriage, was missing. They were shocked. The prisoner escaped. At that moment, someone shouted. The knights hurriedly picked up their shields and steel swords and rushed to the scene of the explosion. After entering the forest, they saw Han Xiao standing in front of a huge pit. Inside the pit were charred corpses that looked like charcoal. They could not see the human form. Rex hurried over and asked with a serious expression, "What happened here? Your prisoner almost escaped, but I found out." Han Xiao shrugged. "You saw it yourself. I accidentally went overboard." Rizar was strangled to death. The knights who rushed over were shocked. Rex's expression changed. He shook his head and said, "The king wants him alive. He shouldn't have died, but he chose to die. What a pity." As the commander, he settled this matter with a few words. He pretended to severely punish a few guards and then ordered the knights under him to go back and sleep. Seeing this, the others did not investigate further. Since Rizar was strangled to death, there was no need to escort him. They did not have to be nervous on the way. Many people heaved a sigh of relief and secretly felt refreshed. Most people had the same thoughts as Rex and wanted to kill Rizar. Some of the knights' hometowns were in the southern territory, and Rizar almost killed their families in the countryside. If it were not for the warriors from a higher world, the consequences would have been unimaginable. They could not pretend that nothing had happened. A few veterans who had followed Rex for a long time noticed something and looked at Rex meaningfully. They knew their commander. The escape this time was probably planned and put on a show for the king and nobles who wanted to capture Rizar alive. Killing Rizar was to prevent anyone from having bad intentions. Rex had a very high reputation in the army and was loved by everyone. The soldiers did not have a good impression of nobles, so they pretended that they did not know anything. After everyone left, Rex nodded at Han Xiao and left together with them. Han Xiao did not return to the camp. Instead, he walked far away. In the dark night, he came to the back of a small hill. Rizar was thrown there. Haluz crossed his arms and guarded beside him. In the end, Rex still handed Rizar over. Although he really wanted to kill Rizar, he did not have much choice in front of Han Xiao. He could only believe what Han Xiao said. "How is he?" Han Xiao asked. "The wound on his chest has been bandaged. He won't die," Haluz replied. "Very good. I'm going to follow the knights to the king's capital. You stay in the wilderness with Rizar. After I'm done, we'll call the spaceship and leave together." Haluz nodded. He then sized Rizar up and asked in confusion, "Black Star, do you want to recruit this mage? He's not a good person. Do I look like I lack people?" Han Xiao patted his back and said, "Don't forget, I promised to bring hundreds of thousands of super warriors to solve the problem of Sunil. I'm not interested in him." "All right, I'll listen to you. I'll stay and watch over him. If he tries to run, I'll kill him." Haluz trusted Han Xiao a lot. He knew that his fate was tied to Han Xiao's. Back then, he had only joined Black Star with a skeptical attitude. After so many things, he firmly believed that Han Xiao had the ability to fulfill the promise he made when he recruited him and had the ability to change the future of his race. "Since you're not recruiting him, "What do you want him for?" Haluz asked. Rizar looked up at Han Shao. His old face was filled with fear and uneasiness. He did not know what was waiting for him next. "Just watch." Han Shao took out a small suction cup device. There were many tiny needles in the center of the suction cup. He pressed them on the blood vessels on Rizar's arm. The needles were inserted into the blood vessels and slowly drew out his blood. Gradually, they glowed with magic. Rizar suddenly felt the magic in his body being drained. He looked at the device on his arm that looked like a blood-sucking bug. This thing was draining his magic. No. He tried his best to struggle, but his strength was quickly draining away. His magic was draining away. Very soon, the wrinkles on Rizar's face increased rapidly. It was as if he had aged 10 years. A sense of weakness spread throughout his body. It was as if he had returned to his childhood when he was still an ordinary person. The magic in his body had dried up, and he had turned back into an ordinary person. "Where's my power? Give me back my power." He had only obtained the power of an ascender for less than half a day. He had not even properly experienced it yet, and he had already lost the power that he had obtained with much difficulty. Rizar broke down. Even when the plan that he had worked on for 20 years failed, he was not as desperate as he was now. Power was the foundation that supported his confidence, and Han Shao had taken away his foundation. After losing his power, Rizar's temperament seemed to have turned back into that of an ordinary person. No, he was even worse than an ordinary person. He cried and begged. Han Shao shook his head. Some people had power and could do whatever they wanted. Once they lost their power, they would become cowards, strong on the outside, but weak on the inside. The device in his hand was this super gene extractor experimental model that he had obtained from the Dark Star's secret message bead. When Haluz saw this thing, he shivered. "Put it away. I'm scared." A few months ago, Han Shao had experimented with the effects of the stripper. The first test subject was Frenzied Sword. The effect of the stripper on players was to absorb 20 to 50 random attribute points and a certain amount of energy, which would be added to the user. The effect lasted from 0 to 20 minutes. In his previous life, the Super Gene Extractor was in the hands of Darkstar. Players could only obtain the damaged Super Gene Extractor by completing the related high difficulty missions. The effect was similar to the one he had, but it was weaker. The practicality of the extractor in battle was very low because it needed to be in contact with the target's body to be effective. Most people had physical or magical armor, so it was difficult for it to be effective. Plus, the prerequisite was to control the enemy and make them not move. The prerequisite was very strict. However, the hidden function of the extractor had to be effective when the target was unprotected. The examples of unprotected states were hibernating, captured, paralyzed, willing, and so on. This meant that the target was completely under one's control. If the player was unlucky enough to be affected, they would enter a 2-hour period of weakness known as sheep's tail, and their attributes would decrease by 30 to 90%, depending on the power of the extractor. If an NPC was affected, not only would they be weakened, but they would also produce an ability potion. After drinking the potion, they would temporarily obtain one of the target's abilities, which would appear as a temporary character summon card on the player's interface. The second experiment subject that Han Shao obtained this result was Haluz. Haluz clearly remembered the fear and weakness he felt when his power was taken away. He had only endured a small amount of damage, but it still took him a few days to recover. This thing that could take away the genes of supers was the natural enemy of supers. Just how many supers have been destroyed by the organization that created this kind of device? Han Shao took out 3 empty potion tubes and stored the blood extracted by the device. "You have received Ability Potion 3. He directly drank a tube of it. The sweet and fishy taste filled his mouth, and the warm blood flowed down his throat. It was very choking. Then, a unique warmth of magic power rippled through his body. "You have received Character Summon Card. Rizar, Temporary. Character Summon Card. Rizar, Temporary. Origin Water Magic Power. Temporarily obtain a power that exceeds one's own. Plus 20% all attributes. Duration, 5 to 5 minutes. Uses, 0/ this character summon card's duration. 5 days, buff bonus, not a bad ability. Han Xiao was very satisfied. Rizar's loss of magic power was only temporary. It was just that this crying old man himself did not know about it. This meant that Han Xiao could continuously take advantage of him and mass-produce ability potions. Although the temporary character summon card's ability would be different every time, Han Xiao believed that the players would pay for this new product. In Han Xiao's previous life, Darkstar had also used the Super Gene Extractor to carry out this plan. The difference was that Han Xiao would not randomly grab someone to use as a battery. The temporary character summon card was just icing on the cake for him. He would not force it. He would only do it if he met someone he could do it with a clear conscience. I remember that you begged me to bring you to the higher world. I'll agree to it now. Han Xiao's smile was like a demon's in Rizar's eyes. This old man trembled, and his face was filled with fear and begging. Going to the higher world like this was completely different from what he had imagined. A thick sense of regret rose from his heart and climbed up to his eyes. You're a demon. Rizar wanted to roar, but he could only make a weak sound. Han Xiao was amused. You're the one complaining first? 2 days later, the Blue Shield Knights returned to the capital. This city was located on a plain. A origin river separated the city in the middle, making it the West Bank and the East Bank. It also separated the classes. On the East Bank were the noble mansions and palaces. They were exquisite and luxurious. On the West Bank was the crowded civilian area. There were many castles, and all kinds of arches and sewage pipes formed complicated streets. Only those who had lived here for more than 10 years remembered the route. Normal people would completely lose their way after walking a few rounds. It was noon. The sun was the size of a soybean hanging in the sky. The light was dim, giving the city a dark yellow color. The buildings and streets covered each other, and the light and shadows were scattered. It was like dusk when the sun was setting. However, this was the brightest time of the day on Planet Dawn. Rex brought everyone to the East Bank and stayed near the palace. The officer came to welcome them. Facing these guests from the higher world, the officer's attitude was even more respectful than when he was facing the king. He could not help but lower his head to the ground. On behalf of the Vane Kingdom, I welcome all of you to Planet Dawn as guests. His Majesty has invited all the warriors from the higher world to attend the palace banquet. He hopes that all of you will do him the honor. At that time, our Ascenders will communicate with you through the Kingdom Protector Mages and pay the remuneration for this employment. When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Of course, no one had any objections. Chapter 406. At night, the palace was brightly lit. Everyone accepted the invitation and changed into exquisite formal attire brought by the affairs officer to attend the banquet. The palace attendant led the way, and everyone came to the garden courtyard. It had been set up as an open-air banquet venue. The bright and warm firelight dispelled the darkness of the night. Exquisite food was placed on long tables. There were green, yellow, and bright purple plants, fruits and vegetables, fragrant barbecued meat from unknown beasts, sweet pies overflowing with fresh milk, and light blue clear wine brewed from source water. Waiters shuttled around with plates in their hands. Musicians sat in the center and played strange instruments. The notes danced happily on the strings while the Vanian nobles with light blue skin toasted each other in the courtyard. The banquet had just started. There was a pavilion in the corner of the courtyard. The Vanian king and high-ranking nobles were sitting in it. They looked at the path in the courtyard frequently. When the upper world warriors arrived, the king cleared his throat and stood up. "Welcome to the palace banquet. I am Gal Mio. Thank you for your generous help," said the king. Mio, in the Vanian language, meant king and leader. It was also the king's self-title. King Gal was a rather sturdy middle-aged man. As he thanked them, he walked down from the pavilion and personally welcomed them without any arrogance. The other nobles stopped talking and bowed to Han Xiao and the others. In front of the guests from the upper world, they knew that their noble status was meaningless. This was a difference in level. It was a little like how a primitive tribe's chief faced a guest from civilized society, but the difference was even bigger. The warriors from the upper world were strong dragons that could ignore the local snakes. Brother Lin looked like he was following Han Zhao's lead. Han Xiao had no choice but to answer as the leader. He said a lot of pleasantries like it was a small matter. Then, King Gao tried to get closer and said a few jokes that were not funny at all. The nobles burst into laughter as if it was some extremely funny joke. A group of kingdom protectors walked out with the galactic communicator in their hands. They were so careful as if it was some kind of holy item. After a few operations, the virtual projection of an ascender appeared in the middle of the courtyard, causing the Vanians to exclaim in shock. Han Xiao heard an old noble beside him say to his son, "Cherish this moment. Only when important guests arrive can we see such a miracle." The eldest Volga pouted. "These people have never seen the world." The second brother glanced at him coldly. "Weren't we like this when we were young?" The eldest brother was speechless. He snorted and stopped talking. He turned around and saw the third brother gnawing on a beast leg happily. His mouth was full of oil. King Jia Lu exchanged a few words with the ascender. The ascender thanked everyone for their help and transferred the reward to everyone's account. Then, he ended the communication. King Jia Lu smiled and said, "Please enjoy the food and wine to your heart's content. This will be a wonderful night." The host and guests enjoyed themselves. Everyone blended into the atmosphere of the banquet. Different civilizations and races had their own cultural customs. Everyone followed the customs. From time to time, nobles would come over to chat. Their attitudes were cautious and curious. There were also programs at the banquet. Not long after, a group of dancers came on stage and shuttled through the crowd. Han Xiao did not feel anything for these blue-skinned Vanians. After drinking a few mouthfuls of origin water wine, he turned around and saw Orosia staring at the dining table. She seemed to be hesitating whether to eat or not. Han Xiao walked over and habitually put his arm around her shoulders. He glanced at her and said, "There haven't been any battles recently. You don't need to use your Esper ability. Eat something." Orosia ignored Han Xiao's actions and picked up a purple fruit. She bit her lips and hesitated. She did not need to eat to survive. She would automatically absorb the free energy in the environment to maintain her consumption. This was the characteristic of an energy life form. However, Han Xiao had been curious about how she would feel when she ate, so he had teased her to eat some food. Although Orosia did not feel hungry, when she tasted the deliciousness of the food, she felt that eating was a rather interesting thing. Thus, eating became her entertainment activity. Compared to the ignorant and extremely calm personality 9 months ago, the current Orosia had more human-like characteristics. Orosia's digestive ability was very powerful. All food would be broken down into energy without any residue, so she did not need to excrete. However, a strange accident happened. The energy transformation could only be used on herself and could not be applied to external objects. Before the food was completely digested, the energy transformation would lose its physical form, and the undigested residue in her stomach would fall out in the form of sputtering. At that time, everyone was about to start a battle with a group of enemies. This scene shocked both sides. Everyone looked at the sputtering food residue under the energy transformation and fell into a deep silence. From then on, Orosia would count the days before eating with her fingers, calculating whether she needed to use her Esper ability before the food was digested. Oh, the strength of her Esper ability grew very quickly, not much inferior to the players. It had already reached plus, only half a level away from the mission requirement of level B. After picking up and putting down the fruit several times, Orosia finally took a bite of the fruit and showed a happy expression. She handed the fruit that she had taken a bite of to Han Xiao. "It's delicious. Try it." Han Xiao took a bite, and his face suddenly wrinkled. He pushed Orosia's hand away. It's sour. You have such a strong taste. Keep it for yourself." Han Xiao taught her to train her energy. After getting along for a long time, Orosia became closer and closer to Han Xiao. The interaction between the two was very intimate, but there were no improper thoughts. Han Xiao did not treat Erosia as a normal female creature at all. In his eyes, she was an energy body without gender, very pure. Erosia herself did not feel like a female, so it was very natural for her to put her arm around his shoulder. Walking to the side, Han Xiao estimated that it was about time. He found King Gallo and said that he wanted to talk. King Gallo invited Han Xiao into the pavilion and asked with a smile, "Captain Blackstar, what do you want to talk to me about?" Han Xiao lowered his voice and said, "It's like this. I want to ask you about a situation. To be honest, I have a special intuition ability. When I arrived, I felt that there seemed to be some kind of virus from the galaxy existing on planet Dawn." King Gallo was shocked. He sat up straight and said, "You're saying that our planet is infected with some kind of disease?" No, this is just a feeling. I still need you to check if there are any large-scale similar symptoms recently. Only then can we confirm whether there is a virus or not." King Gallo took it very seriously. He ordered the affairs officer to organize the intelligence of the various territories. The Vane Kingdom had existed for many years and had a very large intelligence network. Every time, every territory lord would submit a territory report, so it was very convenient to collect the information. Not long after, the affairs officer returned to the banquet courtyard and organized a few pages of reports. King Gallo took a look, shook his head, and said, "They are all normal infectious diseases. There doesn't seem to be any large-scale new symptoms." Han Xiao raised his eyebrows and said, "It might not necessarily be a disease. It could also be an abnormal behavior, such as sleepiness." King Gallo was stunned. Who would check the sleep situation for no reason? Everyone was sleeping with their doors closed. Who would talk about the quality of their sleep the previous night? There was no record of the sleep situation of the people. King Gallo suddenly thought of something and said, "The mine production of the various territories this year has decreased by % compared to last year, but the mine veins have not dried up. Plus, there are more miners than last year. The only factor that can affect the production seems to be working hours. Could it be related to this?" Maybe. Upon hearing that, Han Xiao took another look at King Gallo. To be able to find a hidden connection from a seemingly unrelated matter, this king seemed to be quite capable. The incubation period of the mutation virus was very long, and there were many ways of transmission. The early symptoms of the infected were sleepiness, and they became more and more prone to drowsiness. The symptoms would continue to worsen, and, at most, they could sleep for 2 to 3 days. At that time, the mutation virus was about to break out. The higher the growth rate of the virus, the shorter the incubation period, and the more severe the symptoms. It might even skip the sleepiness and enter the next stage. "I wonder how Blue Star is doing now," Han Xiao thought to himself. King Gallo was a little worried and asked if there was a solution. Han Xiao shook his head and said that he did not know what it was either, but they had better be careful. He then left. Han Xiao had already obtained the information he wanted and reminded King Gallo so that Planet Dawn would not be caught off guard. After all, this planet was also one of the mission targets. During the incubation period of the mutation virus, Han Xiao did not have any solution unless he was willing to give up on the mutation disaster mission that had not started yet. Furthermore, he had to take a huge risk and give the 7th-generation mutation virus to Ghidorah to create the antidote before the disaster happened. He would also have to face Ghidorah's suspicion and interrogation. Doing so would be too much of a loss. He could only wait until the disaster happened and cause a commotion. When Ghidorah and Darkstar officially clashed, only then would he be able to bring out the greatest value of what he had. The only thing I can do to prepare for the mutation disaster is to increase my combat strength. The other methods will have to wait for the right time. The next day, Han Xiao rejected King Gallo's invitation again and left the king's capital. He called for a nearby spaceship in the wilderness and picked up Haluz and Razar before returning to Uberly Hub. Brother Lin received Han Xiao's communicator number and happily left with his men. Now, the Black Star mercenary could be considered a celebrity in Uberly Hub. He finally enjoyed the treatment of the Sky Ring army that he had seen when he first came to Uberly Hub a year ago. He did not need to line up and had priority for many services. As the group walked on the road, many mercenaries and passers-by looked at them kindly and nodded. After returning to the stronghold, Han Xiao knocked Razar unconscious and placed him in an empty room to be used as a prison. He left him there for the time being, as there was something more important that he needed to pay attention to. The International League would begin in 3 days. The International League was split into 2 stages. The first round was the regular season. All the participants would be split into groups and take turns to battle. The top 8 teams with the highest points would enter the international finals, and the top 16 teams with the highest points would enter the singles competition. The second stage of the finals would be a battle of attrition. The winner of 3 out of 5 matches would be decided in the end. On the Chinese side, the qualified teams were King Admiral's Dynasty, Hao Tian's Long Sky, and Li Ji's Temple of God. As for the singles competition, the participants were King Admiral, Snowflower, and Mad Blade's Raging Sword. The other professional players who did not make it into the finals would train with them day and night and generously lend their equipment to the participants. At such an important moment, everyone put down their daily grudges and were united. The clubs of every country were like this. They gave the best equipment and skills to the participants. Every participant had the best essence. This was their first appearance in an international league. Other than King Admiral, who was the calmest, the other participants were more or less nervous. Not only them, but the professional players of every country had the same mentality. They were nervous and expectant. With the big event approaching, the passion of the players was ignited again. The forums were filled with information about the clubs of every country. All kinds of analysis and prediction posts were posted. Compared to the regional league, the international league was even more popular. Players from different countries discussed together, and the forums were very lively. Port Bun had the advantage of being in a favorable position. He temporarily stopped the Black Star chapter that had already been done for 16 episodes and made a special chapter to interview the Chinese participants in a mercenary group. Chapter 407. The international competition is about to begin. This time, I have invited a few captains and contestants to do a simple pre-competition interview. The video was taken at Han Zhao's stronghold in Ubarely Hub. For professional players sat on the sofa and were being interviewed by Port Bun. The 4 of them were King Admiral, Hao Tian, Ligu, Mad Blade, and Furious Sword. They were all captains or contestants of the individual competition. Snowflower, who was originally second in the individual competition, did not join Han Zhao's galactic squad and was still playing in the mud on Blue Star, so he was not included in the interview. The 4 of them greeted the camera and then entered the normal interview process. Port Bun seemed to have transformed into the host of the Galaxy Times. His back was as straight as a pencil, and he sat in a serious manner. However, no matter how formal his posture was, it could not hide the cheap vibe that he was exuding from inside out. The interview was all normal questions, such as whether they were confident, what preparations they had made, and what their expected ranking was. Ask them if they were confident. Try saying no in front of a large audience. Do you still want to keep the club open? What preparations did they make? Who would reveal such team secrets to you? If my opponent sees it, I'll be half the scapegoat, and half of it will be mine. Expected ranking? Which club did not say that they wanted to be the champion? Even if their target was only the top 8 or the top 4, they could not lose in terms of dignity. Professional players who did not aim to be the champion were not good cooks. The 4 professional players answered these kinds of questions very smoothly. After asking these questions, Bun Hit Dog began to talk nonsense with the 4 of them. In this kind of informal interview, the topics could be more casual. Bun Hit Dog threw out the experts and teams from other countries for everyone to evaluate. The atmosphere was harmonious. Who do you think is the strongest opponent in this competition? Port Bun asked. Ligo pondered and said, France's Tulip Club, America's Devil, TS Thundersnake, and Key, England's Rose Knight, Japan's Hydra, Korea's Kimchi, and so on. I am looking forward to practicing with these experts. Although the opponents are very strong, I am confident. These teams were all famous big shots in their respective countries, and their statuses in their respective countries were the same as the four big clans in China. Pork Bun nodded and looked at the other three. Do you guys have any opponents that you value? Kings, generals, and ministers. No. Hao Tian said, my only opponent is myself. Frenzied Sword glanced at the two gods beside him and gulped. I think what Li Ge said is pretty good, he said carefully. Hao Yin and Wang Ho Jiang glanced at him, their eyes full of disappointment. Mad Blade shrank his neck under their stares. Li Ge had a stiff smile on his face. In his heart, he wanted to take off his shoes and slap the two captains' faces. Do you think I can't tell? While they were happily interviewing each other, the bullet screen was filled with complaints. Key of Solomon quickly watched the interview from China and switched to the interview videos from other countries. In France, the captain of the Tulips team, Lost Angel, was being interviewed. You asked me which opponent I value? The three Chinese teams. They're strong opponents. Most of the teams should think so. And Wang Ho Jiang and I are old rivals. Lost Angel was an old general. His voice was warm, and he answered with a smile. Key of Solomon watched the interview programs from other countries. When the host asked about the opponents they valued, China's name would definitely be on the list. All the teams valued China's teams greatly. The level of the Chinese clubs was not bad, and they could be ranked in the top, but this was the first time they were targeted by all the teams. This attention came from their opportunity. China was the only place where participating players had entered the galaxy in advance. These foreign clubs have been paying attention to the experience of the Chinese players in Black Star and saw them as strong opponents. After exiting the forum, Key of Solomon looked at his teammates in the room and said calmly, it seems that the other teams have the same thoughts as us. The Chinese teams are troublesome. Outside the house was the land covered in snow and ice. As far as the eye could see, there were Devil Nest military camps scattered everywhere. From time to time, there would be Devil Army wandering on the land. This house was also a military camp. The few players, including Key of Solomon, all looked like devils. The race on the interface information was juvenile devils. They were more than 2 meters tall, had short horns on their heads, a tail behind them, thick legs with anti-joints, and black devil scales on their bodies. They were fully armed with armor and weapons. Although their faces were ferocious, there were still some human silhouettes. They looked different and could be distinguished. This was the base planet that the American clubs had chosen. It was one of the planets where the Extinguished Army was stationed, Winter Frost Planet. These people were the professional players of the Key Club, and they were all very famous. Poor Electrolux, who was far away in Blue Star, was a retired player of the Key Club. The Key Club was very passionate about planting spies and had a mature operation team that provided all sorts of information and indirect help to their own team. The captain was Key of Solomon. This account was the official account registered by the club. Every captain used this name. The previous one had retired, and this generation's Key of Solomon had just taken office last year. He had defeated all the players in the team through the selection process. The Key Club saw extraordinary potential in him and made an exception to let him be the captain. They decided to focus on training him for the long term and had high hopes for him. The upper echelons of the Key Club were prepared to use 1 or 2 seasons to build an ace team around him and a few old players. They were betting on the future and hoped that they would have the chance to achieve 3 consecutive championships in the future. This was the dream of every team. This generation's Key of Solomon was not as stable as the old players. His battle style and commanding style were known for being fast, fierce, and aggressive. The upper echelons had high hopes for him, and he felt that with his ability, it was natural for him to receive such treatment. However, he had the right to be arrogant. His teammates, fans, and upper echelons all admired his drive. Humility was a virtue of the Chinese, not a virtue of the Americans. Being straightforward and overbearing were the characteristics of the American players. In the first season of the Pro League, most of the clubs had a wait-and-see attitude. They planned to familiarize themselves with the teams and familiarize themselves with the competition. They did not have any requirements for the rankings. However, Key of Solomon did not care about that. He only had one goal, to be the champion. There are many opponents, but there are only a few strong enemies that can pose a hindrance to us. Dynasty is one of them. Other than these obstacles, the other teams are not a threat. They're all prey that we can use to snatch points. Key of Solomon placed his legs on the table and looked at his teammates. The corners of his mouth curled up, and a confident and contemptuous smile hung on his face. Guys, let me lead you to the championship. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. Han Xiao finished dealing with the matters of the mercenary group and did not accept any more missions for the time being. He announced that he needed to rest for a period of time. The international competition would last for 3 to 4 months. Han Xiao only planned to give the players a break at the beginning, about a month's time. He also needed to rest for a while and work out the requirements for class advancement and subclasses. Today was the opening day of the International League. Han Xiao stayed in his room and opened the forum. The live recording of the International League was pinned at the top. It had not started yet. In the hall of the stronghold, all the Black Star players gathered there. The contestants were surrounded in the center, waiting for the market to refresh the gathering crystal. Mad Blade rubbed his hands. He was nervous when he thought about sparring with the experts from various countries. He had never been on such a big stage before. I've built up my reputation in the division competitions, but if I don't perform well in the international competition, more than half of my previous efforts will be wasted. Only by performing well in the international competition can I build up my reputation and even take another step forward. Mad Blade's heart was burning. He secretly prayed that he would not make a mistake. On the other side, the 3 captains, Hao Tian, King Admiral, and Li Go were talking. If any of us are unlucky enough to be in the same group, it's best to cooperate with each other. If any team loses hope of qualifying, then help the other team in the same group. If there's an internal battle, don't try too hard. Li Go said. Hao Tian interrupted him and said calmly, "No matter who the opponent is, I will give it my all. My professionalism does not allow me to go easy." King Admiral yawned and said lazily, "Even if I go easy, you can't beat me." Li Go was so angry that his nose almost went crooked. Why can't these two see the big picture? We are now the representatives of China. If we don't get a good ranking, it's wrong whether we are justified or not. It will have a huge negative impact on the team's reputation. The competition is about results. What's wrong with making some adjustments for a better result? People have to learn to be flexible. At this time, a notification appeared on the contestant panel. Everyone hurriedly entered the market and saw that the gathering crystal had refreshed. After buying it, they crushed it. The crystal spewed out a mist that enveloped everyone. When the mist dissipated, the contestants disappeared from where they were. Just like the effect of the dungeon crystal, they entered a copied scene. Mad Blade's vision blurred. His surroundings changed drastically. He was in a huge arena, surrounded by other Chinese contestants. Looking into the distance, players of different races appeared out of thin air. Players from different countries arrived one after another. They gathered together and sized each other up. The account above their heads was very famous. Tulip from France, Rose Knight from England, Devil from America, T.S., Tomahawk from Sweden. Mad Blade looked at them one by one. They were all famous teams. At this moment, he finally felt like he was participating in an international event. His body trembled with excitement. Beside him, King Admiral was as lazy as ever, waving and greeting many foreign players from afar. Many of the gods knew each other. This scene appeared in the broadcast video on the forum. The players were excitedly talking about the famous professional gods. The lively atmosphere was like a carnival of thousands of people. The host appeared in the center of the arena and attracted the attention of the contestants. He first congratulated the contestants present for entering the National League. Then, he gave an official speech, such as the competition being organized by the International Esport Association, etc. After about 5 minutes, he finally entered the official segment and began to explain the competition rules. There are a total of 3 divisions and a total of 39 strong teams and individual contestants from all over the world have qualified for the international competition. The competition mode continues to be divided into divisions. The team competitions have team competitions, arena competitions, and individual competitions have individual competitions. Hearing the host's explanation, Han Xiao nodded. There were fewer competitions in the first league. In his previous life, there were more competitions in the next few leagues. There were all kinds of strange competitions, such as challenge competitions, dungeon competitions, survival competitions, hunting competitions, speed competitions, and so on. In order to look good, the competitions became more and more crazy. Not only did they have to fight, but they also had to fight until they were in full bloom. The host continued. The 39 teams and their contestants will be divided into 3 groups, A, B, and C. Within each group, there will be a cycle of battles, and the winner will be awarded points. The points awarded will be adjusted based on battle losses, and the top 8 teams and the top 16 individual contestants will be able to enter the finals. He looked around. All the professional players had different expressions. Some were excited, some were serious, some were confident, and some were serious. Chapter 408. When drawing lots, all the teams were sizing each other up. Their gazes toward the Chinese teams were the most frequent, with some caution and respect. Most of them did not want to be in the same group as the Chinese teams. This was a tough nut to crack. The groups were completely random, and the results were out very quickly. Dynasty was in Group A, while Temple of God and Long Sky were in Group B. All the teams were messed up. Group A was the most normal. The ratio of strong teams to weak teams was appropriate. China's Dynasty and America's Devil were the 2 strongest teams, so their chances of qualifying were quite high. Group B was filled with many of the less famous squadrons. It was considered to be a group of weak squadrons, and the environment was the safest. However, there was no guarantee that there would be a dark horse within. Group B's situation was the worst. Out of all the strong squadrons, Kimchi, Tulip, Rose Knight, TS Swedish Tomahawk, etc., almost 60% to 70% of the strong squadrons were placed in this group. Other than the host, there were also specially invited commentators. They were all professional commentators or former retired players. They analyzed the situation for the audience. The qualification to qualify depends on the total number of points. The grouping will have a huge impact on the result. If there are many strong teams in the group, it will be very difficult to obtain points. The teams that have the strength to qualify might fail. On the other hand, if there are many weak teams in the group, even if they are slightly weaker, they can still qualify. Under such circumstances, in order to qualify, the battles will be extremely fierce. No one will dare to hold back. Even if they are facing battles that they will definitely lose, they will make their opponents suffer more losses and earn less points. Therefore, the matches in Group B will definitely be very exciting. Group B is the group of death. There are so many strong teams. If they were placed in the other 2 groups, they would definitely qualify. However, no one can guess the result now. Every team can be eliminated. This kind of competition will be very interesting. I look forward to their exciting performances. The results have been decided. The teams in Group B had solemn expressions, and their eyes were filled with fighting spirit. Li Gu and Hao Tian looked at each other with inexplicable expressions. Looks like you're right. We're in the same group. It's going to be an internal battle. Hao Tian was expressionless. Li Gu frowned and did not say anything. The grouping was disadvantageous for him, but this was something that could not be changed. With so many strong teams, it would be difficult for him to qualify. Today was the opening ceremony. After the lots were drawn, all the participating teams studied the information of their opponents in the same group. For hours later, the official announcement on the forum came out with the competition schedule. The intensity of the international competition was relatively low. In one day in the game, each group would have 2 team battles and 2 individual battles. This meant that the international group stage would last for about 45 days. Each team would have to fight against the other 12 teams in the same group once. The next day, the competition officially began. It was broadcasted on all channels, and countless people witnessed the strength of the champions of each division. It would not be an exaggeration to say that it was a competition between 100 schools of thought. Every team had their own unique tactics and playstyle, and it was eye-opening and exciting. Every group had a rough idea of the situation. North America devil-dominated Group A, and their performance was impeccable, but they had yet to fight against Dynasty, who was in the same group. Although Group B was filled with weak teams that were not that famous, to be able to qualify for the International League, they were also teams that had been cruelly eliminated. Overall, the difference in strength was relatively small, and they were evenly matched. The most eye-catching team was Australia's Kangaroo boxing team, and Group B had the highest viewership ratings. The competition between strong teams was fierce, and it was the most exciting. China's first competition was on the third day. China's Dynasty versus Polish Wings. The Chinese players were looking forward to their team's debut in the international competition. The other teams were also watching. This was a great opportunity to observe the strength of the Chinese teams. Although they were not in the same group, in the hearts of most teams, there was a high chance that they would meet a Chinese team in the finals. They could not afford to be careless. The third day of the competition came under everyone's anticipation. The match between Dynasty and Wings began. The night was dark, and there was no moon in the sky. The desolate ancient ruins, the collapsed houses, and the broken stone pillars seemed to tell the story of what kind of bustling city once existed here. Cold blue balls of light wandered aimlessly in the ruins, like wandering night watchmen, bringing light and dispelling the darkness. This was the actual scene of a novice planet that had been replicated into the competition map. The team battles were all carried out in the replicated scenes, and the terrain was randomly replicated from the various novice planets. The audience had a god's perspective and could see everything that the two teams were doing. The Dynasty team landed in a corner of the ruins. Everyone was wearing senile NCO-class armor and carrying different mechanical weapons. They had a strong sense of technology, and they looked around to observe the situation. The Wings team's class combination is a combination of defensive espers, ranged mages, and battle mages. Their damage output is very high, but their backline is relatively weak. If they fight, they will need to quickly eliminate the backline. The opponent should know they definitely have fast movement skills. Our agility-type players should not follow the team and move alone. Sneak around the battlefield and wait for the opportunity to move. There are two situations for the opponent's damage dealers. The first is that they are under heavy protection, and the second is that they move alone and look for an environment to deal damage. Seeing that the opponent has many damage dealers, these two situations may exist at the same time. The only source of light here is these light balls that are running around. Entering the circle of light will expose you to the opponent. Light areas represent danger, and hiding in the darkness is the safest. Therefore, the battle can only break out in the darkness. It will depend on who discovers the opponent in the darkness first. They have mages who can add cat's eye and life detection, while we rely on the night vision, infrared vision, and radar functions of the mechanical suit. In terms of detection, we are slightly better. King Admiral's tone was calm and experienced, and he quickly analyzed the situation and came up with countermeasures. The team battle was not just about fighting each other head-on. It was a competition of abilities, cooperation, detection, tactics, and so on. The opponent's information was all from the division competitions. Now that so much time had passed, although their classes would not change, the tactics of each team would definitely have new changes. The reason why China was feared was because they had jumped out of the novice planet barrier. There were too many opportunities in the galaxy, and there was no way to predict their tactics and equipment. The unknown was the biggest enemy. Dynasty's class combination only had pugilist and esper abilities, but they were wearing high-quality mechanical equipment, which meant that every member had a part of the mechanic class's long-range attack ability. Even without the machinery affinity buff, their strength was still very impressive. They had an absolute advantage in terms of raw strength. Under such circumstances, Dynasty took the initiative to attack and search for the enemy. In a live broadcast, Wing used all kinds of stealth spells to avoid the enemy. It was obvious that they did not want to fight Dynasty head-on and were very cautious. In his previous life, the side that avoided the battle was usually the Chinese teams, who were both stable and scared. Now their roles had changed, and they took the initiative to attack. Through the bird's-eye view, Dynasty was like a hunter chasing after its prey, taking the initiative while the opponent was running everywhere. Such a strong scene made the Chinese audience feel very comfortable. They could feel Dynasty's strong confidence even through the video. Dynasty's confidence came from Han Xiao. They followed Han Xiao in the galaxy, and their equipment and skills were among the top of all the teams. Their raw strength was extremely strong, and this was the advantage that Han Xiao gave them. It was useless for the professional players from other novice planets to be jealous. They could not find someone as strong as Han Technician on their planet. In the past, it was always the Chinese teams that were chased and beaten. Now, it's the other way around. Not bad, not bad. They're all good young men with a bright future. Han Xiao laughed and was very happy. Wing was very careful and used chameleon and other spells to block traces. However, the map was only so big, and they would not be able to run far. They would have to fight sooner or later. King Admiral ordered his team members to shoot into the sky to break the stalemate and let the enemy hear the direction of the gunshots. This would destroy the uncertain situation and reduce the possibilities. Either the enemy came closer, escaped in the opposite direction, or circled around from the side. Dynasty had the advantage in terms of raw strength, so they were not afraid of the enemy knowing their location. The outbreak of the head-on battle was due to an accident. As King Admiral expected, one of the enemy's battle mages was moving alone around the team. On Dynasty's side, Second Prince, who was also moving alone, was sharp enough to notice the enemy who was alone. Although Second Prince was usually unreliable, he was very decisive during the competition. He would suddenly attack and kill. Second Prince was a pugilist who focused on agility. He could also be called an assassin. He used a scout-type mech with a streamlined and light body. A pair of wrist blades were like deadly poisonous fangs, and he attacked like a cheetah. An assassin's combo was not only smooth, but also as fast as lightning. There was almost no gap between the combo and the change of position. Even among the professional players, it was an excellent operation. That battle mage was attacked and could not react in time. He was instantly heavily injured by Second Prince's flurry of attacks. Before he could hold on until the reinforcements arrived, he turned into a ray of white light and died. Single kill. Second Prince retreated into the darkness again and disappeared without a trace. Only blood was left on the ground, hiding his achievements and fame. The way of the assassin was to retreat thousands of miles after one hit. F***CK, that dagger is so cool. Although Second Prince has a problem with his brain, he is still very strong. The audience was energized and excited. This sudden wave of one-on-one kills opened up the situation. Featherwings lost a teammate, which made things worse. They were caught up by Dynasty's main team and were completely defeated in a group battle. There was nothing they could do. Dynasty had achieved a crushing victory with 0 casualties. They shone brilliantly and made the audience's hearts surge. In the following group battles, they performed even more steadily and defeated their opponents. King Admiral, who was good at one-on-one fights, defeated 2 people and crippled 1. He was very strong. The first match was a perfect start. Compared to Devil, who was in the same group, their performance was not inferior at all. This huge victory boosted the morale of the spectators. At the same time, it also made the other teams even more fearful of them. It was the first time Dynasty's mech had appeared in a competition. This kind of equipment gave the players comprehensive enhancements. If they were to fight Dynasty head-on, no team dared to say that their chances of winning were above 50%. Looks like we need to target the Chinese teams. Many captains had the same thought. Second Prince had done a great job this time. During the post-match interview, he could not hide the excitement on his face. He did not try to hide it either. He went back to his old ways and bragged about how important he had been. He said that key players like him should be captains and that the current captains were too weak. King Admiral was already used to it and pretended that he did not hear anything. The competition went on intensely. They finished one round in 4 days. This meant that every team had fought and completed their debut. How Tian's Long Sky team was the same as Dynasty. Their style was completely different from the previous life. Han Xiao had indirectly changed them. They let themselves go and were very strong. Unfortunately, they met a strong team. Although they won in the end, it was a Pyrrhic victory. They did not get as many points as Dynasty. On the other hand, Li Ji's Temple of God was exactly the same as in the previous life. Even though they had the advantage in terms of strength, they fought steadily and did not want to make any mistakes. Their debut was a match where they had to hold their bladder. They were so good at fighting, but they were so cowardly. Couldn't they be more passionate? However, Han Xiao did not have much hope for Temple of God. Temple of God did not ask for achievements, but they did not ask for mistakes. If they wanted to be aggressive, it would be impossible. Luckily, there was Dynasty and Long Sky this time. Temple of God did not receive much criticism for doing this. After all, the concept of one team having a strong bladder was different from 3 teams having a strong bladder. Chapter 409. The previous chapter has been changed. My calculation was wrong. It should be 78 matches, 39 days of play, and I suddenly exposed my math skills. Thank you, brothers, for correcting me. After the first round, the ranking was out. Devil was in first place, followed by Dynasty. The top 3 to 6 teams were all in groups, and they were having a lot of fun in the fish pond. The strong teams in Group C fought each other fiercely, and most of them won by a lot. They did not gain many points, so they were ranked at the bottom. However, there were also strong players in the strong teams. French Tulips in Group C were in 7th place. It seemed a little low, but their opponent was Tomahawk. Swedish esports had always been very strong, and this was also a strong team that had the potential to win the championship. However, for French Tulips to be able to snatch so many points from them, it was really scary. Han Xiao recalled the first season of the Pro League in his previous life and said, "Yes, the champion of the first season was French Tulips." The strength of this group of people was overwhelming. Their class combination, equipment selection, and skills were almost perfect. Their tactical coordination was flawless. It seems like only Dynasty made it into the top 8 in China. The other 2 teams were in the middle of the rankings and could not make it out. Looking down, the points of the 8th to the 17th place were the same. It was a stalemate. This was only the first round, so the rankings were not important. Every team still had 11 matches to play, and the final result was still uncertain. The ratings for the singles were also very high. Since ancient times, one-on-one battles had been a kind of feeling. Mad Blade barely won the first round, and King Admiral also won. However, Snowblossoms lost. This person was a big man, and his fans all called him Sister Snow. They all felt sorry for his loss. Among all the Chinese players in the first round, he was the only one who lost. After the competition, the Chinese players looked for Han Xiao to repair their mechanical suits. During the competition, these professional players did not hesitate to invest a large amount of anas to strengthen their mechanical equipment. Han Xiao accepted it without hesitation. It was because of the players' hard work that he was able to accumulate nearly 800,000 anas. It was enough to buy a spaceship. Of course, it was impossible to buy a spaceship. Why would he buy one if he could freeload? The competition progressed step by step, and the Chinese team's momentum was very strong. During this period, they also encountered strong teams. Although the battles were difficult, they still won in the end. The equipment that Han Xiao sold to them had been carefully selected. Although the NCO-class armor was powerful, it was not invincible. The players were all at the maximum level of 60, and they had gathered the best of the best in the region. Their equipment was not bad, and they might have hidden some trump cards that could turn the tide of the competition in one fell swoop. Although China's raw strength was at the pinnacle, the competition was ever-changing, and there were countless examples of the weak defeating the strong using tactics. It was impossible for him to sell his core equipment in advance. Han Xiao would not ruin his own sales plan just to improve China's ranking. He did not even understand what was going on in this world. So how could he have the time to control the Players' League? Moreover, the league was more of a business opportunity in his eyes. He wanted to see the players participate in the league mainly because he wanted them to show off their excellent equipment and expand his potential customer base. As long as their ranking was not bad, it was enough for him. After the fierce battles, all the teams had a clearer understanding of their opponents and came up with ways to counter them. China was also targeted. The strongest part of the Chinese team was the mechanical weapons and mechanical suits that came from Black Star. As long as this was targeted, the threat of the Chinese team would be reduced by a level. Therefore, the next few opponents that the Chinese team met all changed their class composition and put in many psychics. In the early stages, the psychic class was the biggest nemesis of the mechanic class. Not only could they control objects, their mental attacks completely ignored physical armor. If it was a mage class, their mental resistance would be high, and they would be able to block it. Pugilists had good physiques and could reduce the duration of negative statuses. The Esper class could not be treated as an exception. Only the mechanic class was targeted. They relied on machinery to fight, and their bodies were mostly weak. Psychics could penetrate through the armor and cause direct damage to the user. Furthermore, they had many mental control methods, such as shock, illusion, confusion, and DUFF. Their attack range was also very long, and they could ignore the terrain. In the face of such a counter, the uniqueness of the Chinese team showed. Although they were wearing armor, their bodies were pugilists and espers. The psychics weakened the effect of the armor and pulled them down from their peak strength. The problem was, even so, the strength of the Chinese team was still top-notch. Their opponents still had to face a group of ruthless professional players. Other than the psychic class, the mage class's elements, rust, and curses also had a counter effect on mechanical armor. Of course, everything was relative. While they countered the mechanical armor, they were also very weak. The existence of the armor made these teams have no choice but to put in more effort to deal with it. The strength of the armor was obvious at a glance. This thing could be used by all classes. It was like wearing a turtle shell with thorns on the outside. It had an additional health bar, and it could also deal long-range damage. If the margin for error for normal teams was 3, the margin for error for the Chinese team was 10. The increase was too huge. Even if there was a certain damage balance, it was impossible to remove the advantage of the Chinese team's equipment. Actually, mechanical armor was something that basically everyone had when they reached version 2.0 or 3.0. When everyone was the same, they would start to compete with the performance of the mechanical armor. The difference would not be as big as it was now. Unfortunately, in the first version, there were very few people who sold armor, and they were all half-finished products. For the time being, only Han Zhao's company had a high-quality, full set of armor service. However, the targeting was still effective. The Huaxia team's losses had significantly increased. Everyone was a strong team in their respective regions, and they couldn't win every single time. The following matches were back and forth, with some wins and some losses. It was very exciting. The rankings on the leaderboard fluctuated every day, tugging at the heartstrings of the viewers from various countries. Dynasty fought against Devil once and won with a slight advantage. They were ranked first in the leaderboard and attracted a lot of attention. Such a result made the Chinese viewers proud. Every time it was a Chinese competition, they would definitely watch it on the forums. Not only the Chinese viewers, but many foreign viewers were also fans of the Dynasty team. The viewership ratings of the Chinese competition could be ranked in the top 3. Compared to the bleakness of Han Zhao's previous life, it was a complete change. As for Long Sky and Temple of God in Group C, the situation was not so good. They were constantly hovering between 8th and 12th place, on the verge of qualifying. The competition was very intense. Ubarely Hub, Black Star Mercenary Stronghold. An unused alloy room had been transformed into a prison cell. Rizar was imprisoned there. His limbs were firmly fixed to the metal bed, and a few syringes were inserted into his body, injecting him with nutrients and sedatives. His eyes were empty, and his face was haggard. He looked like he had been played to the point of being broken. He was used as material for the extractor. He had no freedom and was almost tortured beyond recognition. The magic that he had just recovered would be sucked away, not giving him any hope at all. The door opened, and Han Xiao walked in. He glanced at him and did not stop moving. He changed a new set of nutrients and even hummed a tune. He turned a blind eye to Rizar's miserable state like a doctor who was used to seeing life and death. He then took out the extractor and drew blood as usual. The bright red blood with fluorescent light flowed into the test tube and turned into a new ability potion. Han Xiao already had 8 sets of potions in his hands. Rizar turned his head to look at Han Xiao and spoke. His hoarse voice was almost inaudible, filled with deep weakness. "Are you planning to trap me forever?" "Of course, not forever." Han Xiao raised his eyebrows. "Do you think you can live for that long?" Can we make a deal? You set me free, and I can give up everything to work for you. I just want to come to the higher world to satisfy my desire for knowledge. I won't resist working for anyone." Rizar pleaded. Han Xiao picked up the new ability potion with 2 fingers and shook it. The sticky red liquid hung on the wall. He turned to look at Rizar and smiled. "I already have everything that you have." "You? Good. Poison." Rizar clenched his teeth. His eyes were filled with bone-deep hatred and deep despair. "I won't do this to the innocent. If you were a normal person, maybe I would sympathize with you, but you're a villain who almost killed millions of people." "Hee. Do you expect me to sympathize with you? That's an insult to the millions of people who almost died because of you." Han Xiao's heart did not waver at all. He had experienced the dark period when he was imprisoned by the Germinal organization and used as experimental material. He understood this feeling very well. He was very happy to inflict it on people like Rizar. He had never been a kind person, nor was he a good person. "Wait for the day you die. That kind of release is your last hope." Han Xiao's tone was calm. He closed the door, leaving Rizar screaming in despair inside. His old and weak body let out a beast-like howl. Back in his room, Han Xiao cleaned and disinfected the extractor. He lined up all the ability potions and put labels on them. With the help of the Pro League, these potions were ready to be sold to the players. Looking at these potions, Han Technician suddenly had an idea. The extractor can only form potions when used on NC. If I extract my own genes, will it work? You are using Super Gene Extractor experimental model on yourself. You have received ability potion X1 inch. It really works. Han Zhao's eyes sparkled. He then looked at his character interface. A weakness, UFF, was applied to him. It lasted for 12 hours, and all his attributes were reduced by 30%. He felt a little weak and sluggish. He did not mind. He was resting in Ubarely Hub. He did not have a chance to fight during this period, so a moment of weakness was not a problem. What effect will my ability potion have? Han Zhao's curiosity was piqued, and he rolled his eyes. Chapter 410. A faint light flashed, and Madblade, who had just finished today's match, appeared in the Stronghold Hall. He looked a little worried. "Sigh, I lost another battle. Lost Angel is too steady, and I really can't beat him. My ranking dropped again. My next opponent is Key Club's Key Club. He's also a strong guy. If I lose again, I won't be able to advance." Madblade shook his head with a worried expression. More than half of the competition was over, and the situation was getting clearer and clearer. In the team competition, Dynasty had secured a spot in advance, and Long Sky and Temple of God were still on the verge of 8th place. If they lost a battle or got too few points, they would be left far behind. With the harsh environment in Group C, it was extremely unlikely that they would be able to catch up. However, the team competition did not have anything to do with Madblade. His performance in the singles was average, and he was ranked around 17 or 18. His chances of winning were about 50%, but it was extremely difficult for him to win every time. He felt that the mechanical pugilist class was lacking. Although the mechanical pugilist class could fight and tank, be it close range or long range, and was more well-rounded, they did not have any special strengths for the time being. Although his mechanics were very good, there was still a gap between him and the top players. These monsters in the singles all had their own special tactics and were good at dragging the battle into their rhythm. Mad Blade realized that if the mechanical pugilist wanted to catch up in this aspect, the only way was to rely on stronger or more unique mechanical weapons. However, the weakness of the mechanical pugilist class was not the fault. The mechanic class was not very suitable for the first version. After all, every version was a god. In order to make up for the shortcomings of the mechanical pugilist class, he could only rely on stronger machinery and higher level bonuses in the later versions. In every version, the mechanical pugilist was a class that was playable, well-rounded, and not bad. They could be both the main tank and damage dealer. They were the choice between T2 to T3, and their development curve was very smooth. It was already very difficult for Mad Blade to be able to achieve such a result, other than his own skill level. A bigger reason was the high-quality mechanical equipment he had obtained from Han Xiao. If he had not met Black Phantom back then, he would have only been able to participate in the district competitions and would not have been able to step onto the international stage. Among all the players that followed Han Xiao, Frenzied Sword was the most hardcore supporter. Not only had he received the most help, but it was also because they had spent so much time together and liked Han Xiao a lot. Sometimes he even felt that Han Xiao was a real person. Although all the NPCs in Galaxy looked like real people, Han Xiao gave him a very special feeling. Maybe it was because Han Xiao was the first important person he met, so he had a strong first impression of him. After calming himself down, Mad Blade prepared to look for Han Xiao to repair his equipment. At the same time, he also wanted to add some new weapons for the next match, hoping that they would be of some use. Just as he was about to leave, Han Xiao arrived at the lobby first. Mad Blade immediately went up and expressed his desire to repair his equipment. The interface of his shop appeared before his eyes. He quickly browsed through it and suddenly found a few new products at the bottom. Ability potion? I've never seen it before. Is this something new? Mad Blade was surprised. Han Xiao placed a few ability potions into the shop interface. There was a limited quantity, so he had set a high price. The effect of the ability potion was to obtain an ability from another character for a short period of time. It also stated who the ability potion came from. The ability potion that Han Xiao had created with his own genes was among them, and it was discovered by Mad Blade at first glance. There's only one ability potion from Black Star. What effect does it have? The price of the ability potion was 2,000 anus. It was not cheap and was even a little expensive. One would only know the effect after using it. The temporary character summon card that was obtained every time had to be one of the creator's abilities. As for the ability that was drawn, it was random and not fixed. Before Mad Blade decided to buy it, Dynasty, Temple of God, and the other teams also came over and discovered the new product ability potion. Temporarily obtained the ability of another person. This looks like a UFF potion. Why is it so expensive? Is the effect very good? In order to increase their combat strength, these teams did not hesitate to spend. Hao Tian immediately bought one of Rizar's ability potions. After drinking it, he was notified that he had obtained a temporary character summon card. The effect was to increase the damage of his next magic attack by 77%. He was a little surprised. It's a pity that I'm not a mage. Otherwise, this buff would be pretty good. I can use it at the crucial moment in a team battle, such as an excellent AoE opportunity or a burst attack to kill the opponent's weak HP. If used well, I can secure victory in one fell swoop. It was not the player's first time coming into contact with character summon cards. Character summon cards could increase combat strength, and they were very practical. Usually, they would only be rewarded by special missions. They did not expect Han Xiao to sell character summon cards here. Although it was temporary, it was their first time seeing it, so they were both surprised and happy. Hearing this, Mad Blade's eyes sparkled. He hurriedly took out his money and bought the only Black Star ability potion. He was a mechanic, and so was Black Star. His ability would definitely be compatible with his. Ignoring the teams fighting for the other ability potions, Mad Blade walked to the side and carefully drank Han Xiao's potion. A notification appeared on the interface. You have received character summon card. Han Xiao, Temporary. Mad Blade's eyes widened, and shock froze on his face. He could not help but rub his eyes, afraid that he had seen the wrong number. 2.5 times. Mad Blade almost spat out water. Even after using all my buff skills, my machinery affinity is only half of this. Blackstar's attributes are too scary. Just how strong is he? This was no longer something that could be described as crazy. This was a UG type of buff. Using this character summon card at this level, not to mention techniques or mechanics, even a pig would be able to rush through the enemy. Han Xiao had many abilities, but this temporary character summon card had drawn his machinery affinity. This was not a skill, but one of the Han technician's basic attributes, so it had become a UFF buff effect. Without using any skills, Han Xiao's talents and passive abilities had increased his machinery affinity by 247%. Once he used a skill, this number would increase by 1 to 200. This was the simplest effect, but it was also the most brutal buff. This was because machinery affinity was the core attribute of the mechanic class, and it directly affected their combat power. As the level of the mechanic class increased, the machinery affinity would continue to increase. However, using the temporary character summon card would give an additional buff, which was a complete leap in strength. It was almost equivalent to temporarily gaining the attributes of a few dozen levels later. And after a few dozen levels, it was the level of the mechanic class. Luckily, the temporary character summon card could only be used once. If it became a fixed skill of the players, it would be incredible. Lonely like snow, invincible, invincible, invincible. Looking at Mad Blade's heavy breathing and extremely excited expression, Han Xiao stroked his chin and was extremely curious. What ability did this kid get? Why is he so excited? Mad Blade, Angry Sword, 3rd place in the Blue Star Division singles, mechanical pugilist class, known as the #1 mechanical pugilist in China. In the stronghold of the Key Club on planet Winterfrost, Key of Solomon casually browsed through the information of his next opponent in the individual competition. He smiled casually, and his tone carried faint pride and strong confidence. Looks like there's no suspense. You're planning to use Howling Gate? The old member Cursed Scepter asked. You're thinking too much. I don't even need to use my trump card to win the next opponent. I dare to bet that experts like Lost Angel, Rose Knight's Golden Champagne, and Devil's Martial Scarlet all have their ultimate moves. Although I'm currently ranked 7th, as long as I use my trump card, I'll definitely be able to reach the top. However, it's enough to just get out of the group stage. It's best to save my trump card for the finals. Key of Solomon was very confident in his trump card. Howling Gate was a special casting tool that he had obtained from an extremely difficult hidden mission. Although he didn't know what the trump cards of the other experts were, he was confident that he was invincible in one-on-one battles at this level. Even if he didn't use his trump card, his combat power was one of the best. Being able to fight to the 7th place already showed his strength. After this round, my ranking will increase by 1 more place. The last few opponents are more difficult to deal with, so I can preserve my strength and intentionally lose. This way, my ranking will probably drop to 15th place, just enough to guarantee that I can get out of the group stage. That's enough. Based on the prerequisite of winning the next round, Key of Solomon started to formulate the final group stage plan. In his eyes, the next round was a bonus before facing a strong opponent. Victory was already in his hands, and he did not even have to consider the possibility of losing. Winning was a certainty. It just depended on what method he used to win. Mad Blade was one of the few mechanics in international individual competition, and he was also the only seedling of China's mechanic class. He had the title of China's #1 mechanical pugilist and received the attention of many fans and viewers. Since the start of the competition, Mad Blade's performance had been average, and he was ranked in the middle. However, even in the matches that he won, the viewers could see that it was very difficult for him to win. His ranking could not increase at all, as if he had already reached his limit. Among the 3 Chinese players, King Admiral was ranked at the top and did not have to worry about getting out of the group stage. Meanwhile, Snowflower was ranked at the bottom. Now that the competition was more than halfway through, Unless he won all the following matches, there was no hope for him to get out of the group stage. Meanwhile, Mad Blade was at the edge of the 16th place and had the chance to become the second Chinese player to get out of the group stage. He carried the hopes of many fans. Mad Blade's following match schedule was more extreme. He would either be facing the top 10 experts or the weaker ones at the bottom. According to the analysis of his fans, even if he could defeat all the weaker players, his points would be slightly lower. He would have to defeat at least one expert to have a chance of getting out of the group stage. However, Mad Blade's current performance was not good. His chances of winning against experts were very low, and the situation was not optimistic. His opponent for this round was Key of Solomon, who was ranked 7th. Many fans were secretly anxious and cheered for him. There were also people who were sarcastic, saying that Mad Blade had been blindly praised as the #1 mechanical pugilist in China and had embarrassed himself overseas. In short, there were all kinds of comments on the forums. No matter how one looked at things, time would not slow down. The day of the competition arrived on time. Mad Blade and Key of Solomon entered the competition venue. The screen that the audience saw had their HP, stamina, status bar, and other attribute values. The situation of the match was clear at a glance, and it was convenient to watch. The battle venue was a huge city. Tall and thick concrete and steel walls surrounded the city tightly. The two of them landed on the two ends of this huge wall that was dozens of meters tall and 4 to 5 meters wide on average. They could see each other's tiny figures from afar. In the screen, the north wind blew, dark clouds covered the city, and flying sand and leaves. It was desolate and vast. The audience zoomed out from the god's perspective and realized that the outside of the huge wall was painted with a few big words in red paint. Black Phantom Sanctuary 3. Haha, I actually randomly got this venue. Yo, I recognize this place. Isn't this our planet's Sanctuary 3? You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.